The video, what? You are live.
Yep, there we go.
Okay. All right, since we're live, we'll call the meeting to order, and if everyone could stand, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Nick's going to screen share a flag.
Okay.
All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Was everyone stationed facing east? I hope.
Well,
All right.
it's not necessarily east.
Oh, yeah.
You mean if you're a Muslim?
I don't know. No, if you're saying the pledge when you don't have a flag, I think you're supposed to face the east. But
Oh,
maybe.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
But
Ramadan.
we had our flag, and I'm facing east now, I guess. All right. We have first up. We have swearing in of our newly elected board members, so they should probably unmute their microphones. And Tim Miner, you do us the favor.
I'm going to take a picture.
Actually, there's nothing to for me to do. They Carrie and Heather have the verbiage in front of them, or should have the verbiage, and they can just recite the oath individually. Who wants to go first? Okay, go ahead, Heather.
All right. I, Heather Loughlin, having been elected to the Board of Education of the School District of Hudson, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Carrie?
I, Carrie Whitaker, having been elected to the Board of Education of the School District of Hudson, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Right. Very good. You guys are now official. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right.
Thank you.
We got you for 3 more years, each of you. All right. Next up is we have one action item, and that is personnel hires, changes, retirements. Is there any introduction to this, Andrea or Nick, that we need?
I'll turn it over to Andrea.
And I would just say it's a very active time of year right now. We're trying to hire as many people as possible. So you'll see we have 14 new certified staff hired, as well as additional 3 changes within the certified staff positions. So we are going fast and furious. And then also Molly Poutier is retiring.
Okay. All right. And well, does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to approve these, which are typically would be in a consent agenda, but we didn't. This is not our typical action meeting, but I understand the reason for taking action prior to our May 11th meeting.
So moved.
All right. Motion by Bruce, second by Carrie.
Second. Oops.
Raise her hand. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now we move on to our discussion items. First up, Nick, you're going to give us a COVID-19 response update.
Yeah, and we're going to have kind of multiple people involved in this as we kind of go through it, but just kind of giving you guys a little bit of an update of what we have going on and in the process of what we've been working on. So no shortage of things to do as we try to continue to deliver education to our kids across the district, but also deal with some of the logistics that are bringing the school year to a close, and also starting to plan for the next school year. And so as you kind of heard from Andrea, staffing wise, we're still moving forward. So she'll talk about that in a few minutes. First, I would just like to say that we've brought custodians back to the buildings today. So they are back working in buildings to start the essential functions of getting our buildings doing our summer cleaning and things along those lines in order for us to continue to have, to do business. So today was the first day back. We brought them back. They were wearing, they needed to wear a mask while they were back. They needed to follow the social distancing guidelines and work through some of those. And so good to have people start getting back into the buildings, but we're definitely wanting to take all the precautions that we possibly can with them. Jim and his team have really been, working to make sure that we're taking all of those things into consideration. As far as food service goes, I'll let Tim kind of give a little bit of an update on food service in this COVID time. Tim, you're muted. Still muted.
Tim, you keep talking, I'll read your lips and I'll say what you want to say.
Yes. Thank you, Dave. Okay, let's try it again. So from April 1st through last Friday, we served 10,688 meals. Those are breakfast and lunch. And a breakdown is a little over 5,000 breakfasts, about 4,900 lunches. We delivered 200 meals, and then we packed some up. We had some requests to pack up for a week's worth, so we did about 500 of those, and we provided 79 to our SAC program. So the numbers are okay, and we continue to look at ways to try and bring more participation. We've got a number of different organizations distributing food, so I think that does have an impact on our days sometimes, depending on who's distributing food that day. But so those are our numbers.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So as we continue to kind of push through on this, any questions about food service related items on there from anybody?
Just a quick question, if you don't mind. With regards to the number of breakfasts and lunches, are we trending with what we expected? I mean, certainly with COVID and stuff, certainly there's probably not a real baseline, but are we within whatever you thought we might see, above, below? Just curious.
I think we're a little lower based on the numbers of free and reduced. We did, we've got about 460 people, parents that have signed up, our kids, and we're not getting, not all of those that sign up are coming in. So that's why we're looking at, just looking at different times. We've tried a number of different times. We're going to try to stick to a time now. And so it's more hopefully that's more predictable for parents.
For those folks that signed up and haven't been participating, is there any kind of outreach or not so much?
We have not tried that yet, Rob, but that would be a possibility. That's normally, some people may have just signed up and left their name on the list. We did ask people if they didn't need it, then they can just call and take their name off the list, and they can come back on whenever they want. But we just haven't had many people do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. As we're moving on through, so one of the big challenges, one of the big logistical items that we're working on right now is, working on getting students and teachers, get students their stuff that they still have in buildings, allow teachers to close up their rooms and things like that. And what does that process look like? And so we've been working with building principals and buildings and grounds over the last couple of, probably week and a half. We also pulled together a teacher advisory committee on Monday of last week, ran some ideas by them, got their feedback on things. And so really what we're looking at doing is staff are going to be coming in. They're going to be a set schedule. So we limit the number of people in the building so we can maintain social distancing and not have any one area of the building overloaded with people. But staff is essentially going to be coming into the buildings, teaching staff, and they're going to be packing up what's left of student stuff, whether it be in their desk or in their lockers. And so we ordered about 7,000 boxes last week, about the size of a copy paper box. And so each student will have a box. So essentially the staff will empty what's left in student desk or student lockers or things like that in those boxes. They get labeled. And then once that's done, like at the elementary, for example, once classroom teachers have done that, then the specials teachers can come in, and all the art projects or music projects or things like that will then get dropped in all of those boxes and things along those lines. And then we'll set up a curbside pickup. We'll have special days for certain grades and certain alphabets to come pick up what's left of their student stuff. You know, when we talked to the teacher group about this last Monday, one of the things that they brought up was, you know, every elementary classroom is different. I mean, some have desks, some have tables, some have cubbies, some have all these different things. And really, the only person that's going to know where everybody's stuff is going to be that classroom teacher. And so having them help us pack that stuff up, again, utilizing, you know, the same type of protocols we'd have with A staff coming in at this time. So once that happens, then they will also then kind of pack up their room for the summer like they would traditionally do at the end of a school year, so that we can start the summer cleaning process with our custodial team and work through that. You know, in order to do this, obviously it takes time, and we don't want to necessarily put a break in with the instructional time. And so we talked again to TAC about this, and what we thought we would do is we would allocate 16 hours of this time. They could sign up for different times with their building principals. And this would be the last 2 days that they would normally have on their contract. They would they'd work these 16 hours instead of those last 2 days. So kind of like what we do with conferences, where we essentially, you know, have them work additional hours, you know, during the day, and then they end up with a, you know, comp day on the tail end. It's that type of thing. We got a pretty positive response from TAC, and principals will be working with staff so that we can kind of try to work around their schedules. And we know that they, you know, there's childcare issues and things like that, but they won't be allowed to bring kids in with them into the building, or their spouses or any other family members. But really dedicating 2 days worth of contract time to get the kids' stuff boxed up, packed up, and get the rooms packed up for the summer as we kind of work through that. Questions about that? And as you can imagine, logistically, that's a challenge when you start thinking about thousands and thousands of boxes and making sure they get to the right kids, and make sure people get them picked up. And what we're going to set up with that is the pickup time for that. And we don't have all the times worked out exactly yet, but it's probably going to be, it'll be right after we finish probably large group instruction. And what'll happen is they'll do a drive up curbside and pick up their box. You know, they'll just tell the person, okay, I'm picking up, you know, Jasper Ouellette's box. Okay. Somebody will go in, they'll grab the box, you know, to be set up at the right time. And then if Jasper happened to have a Chromebook, a district issued Chromebook or hotspot or something like that, then we would collect it at that time. You know, it's kind of like almost a trade, so they don't have to make multiple trips back to the building. So we're giving them their stuff back, we're getting our stuff back, and working through that process. But as you can imagine, you know, it's important that we get teachers working on this sooner rather than later, because as we've brought custodians back in the buildings, they'll need to start cleaning those individual rooms and stuff like that, but they really can't do that until after those rooms are basically summer ready as we work through that. So that's what that process is going to look like. Each building principal is going to be sharing that information with their staff and kind of going through what the particulars are and what that's going to look like. Let's see here, kind of going through some of these items on here we're going to talk about. There's separate topics on the agenda. Staffing, Andrea, if you want to maybe touch on staffing, kind of an update of what we've been doing and the process and how that's been going.
Sure. Yep. So we have been, as you could see from the personnel pack, moving full speed ahead in terms of the staffing for next year. We'd already defined that back in March before all this occurred. So we have been doing Zoom or Google Meet Hangout type of interviews. It's been working really, really well. And I think we've done, because we have 5 more offers pending right now with certified staff. So we've been doing about 20, and we have another 5 or 6 lined up for the rest of this week. So our goal has been to get as much of this done as possible before May 15th, so that we can be situated pretty good in terms of getting the best candidates as soon as we can and get them confirmed and lined up, and so that we're able to move to the next part of the transition as we're looking at next year. So I'm very happy with where we're sitting, and we have we've already hired, I think, 2 counselors. You just acted on those. Some of those staffing additions that we've done for this next school year. So really excited about it. And I think we have some great brand new teachers.
Great. Thank you. Any questions about staffing at all for Andrea? Okay. Another thing coming up is summer school, and there's a lot of unanswered questions about summer school, and Sandy will be able to touch on that a little bit, but it's right now we're kind of in a holding pattern, and she kind of go through some of the things that we're looking at.
Yes, just as Nick said, we're definitely in a holding pattern. Students have already registered for June summer school, and they've already registered for summer swim. And so now we're waiting. We're hopefully know more in like 7 to 10 days on what will be the guidelines for July, like group size. Can we have classes of more than 8 or 10 students? So then we could contact our parents who have students registered for June and then transfer them to July sessions. And as well as summer school, we'd have to wait then to start July 1st and probably try to fit in 3 sessions if at all possible. But as soon as we have more information, then we'll let our parents know and start transitioning over to July and August.
And really, the biggest challenge we have, and I talked to our public health official right before we got on this meeting, is not quite understanding what the Badger bounce back plan means, because there's kind of some conflicting information in there, and some of it shows that once we hit phase 1, schools are able to operate as normal. In other areas, it shows that potentially we would have to fall under that 10 person guideline. And so, we're really hoping for some clarity every time we're on calls with both the state, the Department of Public Instruction, and with public health. We're saying we really need clarity. I know the governor keeps talking about, turning a dial as far as we open things up. It tends to be that same thing for us. I mean, in order for us to turn the dial, we have to have information far enough ahead. And it seems like as of late, what's happening is they keep flipping the switch with different orders, and we get zero heads up or any type of warning as to what's coming. Like, for example, nobody had any idea, including our public health officials, that there was going to be another executive order coming out today that was going to open up dog grooming and TV rentals and things like that. I mean, so that's one of the frustrating things is, we don't know what's going to happen with some of the stuff. And so we keep asking, we need more guidance as to what school looks like in phase 1, what does school look like in phase 2 or phase 3. And so it's really a challenge to try to plan for those things when we're not quite getting some of that information. So any questions about summer school?
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
Just in regards to the pool, I know we normally have a cleaning that happens after school is done. Is there any way we can get on that earlier instead of while we're still in this period where kids can't come back to a point when maybe it can be open, we can get at it instead of having to have it closed for a couple weeks?
I think our goal is to kind of wait until the governor says we can go swimming again and then close the pool for a couple of weeks. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So essentially what's happened is, I've given Jim Stayskool and his crew the green light on those types of projects. They're essential projects for us to operate as a school district. And, we've gotten legal guidance on it. And so that now we can start doing some of those projects. You're going to see some remediation work on the east side of the high school being done by some of our contractors. So there's probably going to be a little bit more activity starting to happen at our buildings. And so, yes, I mean, the pool and getting the pool cleaned and things like that, maintenance work, we're going to try to take care of a lot of those things. We've even talked about, every year with gym floors, we do those in the summer. We'll try to get those done while the buildings are closed to students, so that if the buildings get open this summer, our pools are open, gyms are open. As Sandy talked about summer swim, we're ready to hit the ground running. Okay, and the last area I wanted to touch on, and again, if you have questions, I'm going to let kind of Tracy talk a little bit about, you know, our school age care, because normally we have a pretty robust backpacker program in the summer, which provides childcare.
So right now we continue to operate serving the tier 1 and some of the tier 2 essential workers. We have about 18 families who are attending on a regular basis, so that amounts to 29 kids. We try to keep around 10, as Nick was talking. The guidance from the state and from Department of Children and Family requires that we keep kids in groups of 10. And so that's how we're operating. Looking ahead to summer, unless that changes, that's how we would continue to have to operate. So that's significantly different from how we typically run school age care during the summer. So that guidance from the state is that those groups of 10 have the same group of staff working with them, the same restrooms that they're using, so that we're not commingling kids in any way. So we'll continue to watch that to see if things change with the state.
So one of our challenges with school age care in the summer is if they don't alleviate some of those restrictions, it'd be very difficult for us to ramp up to our normal backpacker program. Because essentially we would have to utilize all of the square footage across all of our buildings to try to accommodate that, which then means we couldn't get any of our summer stuff done or cleaning done and things along those lines. And so we're, again, needing more feedback or more guidance from the state as to what that looks like. I mean, one of the things in the Badger Bounce Back Plan says, if we get to phase 1, child care centers can open as normal, run as normal operation, while our backpacker program is really, you know, summer child care. And so we just need to understand, is that the case? And if that is the case, you know, are we able to do it in a building, and what does that look like? Heather, you had a question?
Yeah, well, I think you partially addressed it. I was wondering if we were going to extend beyond those level 1 and level 2 provider families, and if there was a date by which we were telling folks we'd make a decision. I know I have a couple people on my team who are wondering about what their summer options are going to be, because they usually take advantage of the backpacker program.
So right now, the directive from the state is that we have to give priority to tier 1 and tier 2. And that if we open beyond those, that we need to, if a tier 1 came in, we need to bump whatever the is beyond that tier 2. So currently, under the state orders, we're implementing it as we can. So without having to, we've had some interest, not a lot, of folks outside of tier 1 and tier 2, but we haven't been able to serve them at this time just because we don't have openings for them at this time.
Any other questions?
All right. So, you know, that kind of talks a little bit about school age care and where we're at, kind of an update logistically. And then the last thing that's really a large undertaking Tim's going to address is refunding of fees and things that people have paid that maybe have not happened. Tim, I don't know if you want to touch base on where we're at and what that looks like.
Sure. So, yeah, we, as Nick said, it's a big undertaking. We're currently collecting information on different fees at the different sites that have not been used yet, so we can kind of get an idea of the magnitude of it and what types of fees need to be refunded. So we'll be going through that. We're in a data collection phase right now, and then we'll start to roll out a plan to refund those fees to families, get those out as soon as we can. So that's our next step after we get the data collection in place.
And Jim, is there a plan for the rollout? Is just chronological? I mean, you're going to refund the ones from the events that were to happen earlier in the school year, or?
So it would be any unused fees, Jamie. So if I paid a fee for a spring sport that hasn't taken place, then that would be refunded. Prom is a big one that would be refunded. And, you know, if they had any class fees say for tech ed or for art class that for a project that just never got started, those would be things that would be refunded.
Okay, but
What,
as far as the
can I just-
order people might expect, that's what I'm just wondering if there's any expectation of timing.
Of timing, I would say within the next month, we'll start issuing refunds.
Okay. All right. Is there other questions? I saw Bruce, Heather.
yeah. One other question, I guess, just in regards to those fees, does that include the choir trip? And is there any update that you guys have on the choir trip and the, you know, where that's at in terms of negotiating any of those
So,
fees or returns?
so the choir trip is not a fee that the school district would refund. That's something that I believe they're working through the travel company, and Dave would have probably more details on that. We know that I believe from what we understand, the airfare has been refunded to folks, but they are working, the travel company is working with the ground company that does all the ground arrangements, hotels, transportation, things like that. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of canceled trips, and I think, you know, these companies are a little overwhelmed, but I know they are pushing to try to get a refund that way, and work that. I don't know, Dave, if you have anything else you need to add to that.
The only additional thing is that the insurance has been refunded too for families that opted for insurance because that turned out to be a non-issue. So that, and as Nick said, the airfare has been refunded. We reached out today to the company to get a status update, have not heard back yet from them. Worked with Andy Hayes and Nikki Bentz at the high school. Andy's been great working directly with the company, trying to get them to be as responsive as possible.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, I'll just continue on with what Bruce was asking. Yeah, my understanding of talking to Andy is that the airfare and that insurance money was going to be received as one check and then delivered to the school district, and then the school district was going to disperse it. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding, and I'd have to check, maybe Tim knows. I thought that was underway. I'll have to find out where they are in that process, but I know that the money has already been refunded, so we should be able to get that money back to families if it has not already happened.
Any other questions on the COVID-19 update then, Heather?
Yeah, you mentioned refunding spring sport fees. How will we handle the situation with students for whom spring sports would have covered their PE requirement?
As far as are we going to allow, allow them to continue to get PE, or is that what you're kind of wondering, or?
Yeah, so athletes who were counting on their spring sport as covering their PE requirement for the next year.
Dave,
So
do you have an answer to that?
So you're talking about the policy that allows them, if they're taking a course above and beyond, that counts as their PE. The last conversation with the high school administration, it was, we were going to allow it to happen next year yet. Or do you have a senior in mind?
No. I'm thinking, maybe I misunderstood. I thought like if you have a junior who plays a spring sport, then they don't, that counts as one of those quarter credits or something like that. And then they don't have to fit that PE into their schedule or take the summer PE, that it covers it. Am I misunderstanding that?
Nope, you're accurate. My understanding though is they were going to look at how they could handle it next year when they do return.
And that is something too that we could bring back to the board, because it is in policy. If we needed to make some flexibility, provide some flexibility in the policy. As an example, you might have a student that played not at the varsity level, was about to play at the varsity level, but didn't. I think that's something we could talk about, providing that flexibility, but because it is in policy, we bring that back to you. That's a good question. I hadn't actually thought of that.
Good question, Heather. And I think that there's probably likely to be other things that come up between now and the start of next school year, things that people wondered if they're getting credit for or how we're going to approach it because of all these changes. It's just a pretty massive sea change here.
And I think the thing is, you know, even with the fees, you know, and Tim didn't totally touch on the fact that, you know, it's not, you think about the big fees like athletic fees or prom and things like that, but You think about all the field trips that were collected, money for field trips for the course of the year, all of those different components, and not everything was collected in fee pay. And, you know, some stuff was collected at the classroom level, then turned into the office and deposited. So then what happens is, depending on how these fees were collected, we have to issue refunds in a similar manner. I mean, we don't have the ability to issue them a check if they paid for it with a credit card. And, you know, and so there's a lot of complexities that go into this, and that's why it's not as quick to turn around as some people would like. On top of that, you know, we have staff working remotely all over the district, but you know, it is a challenge. So like Tim said, phase one is really determining what are all the fees that got paid and that didn't happen. And even like some of the elementaries, for example, they might pay a $10 field trip fee for the year. They may have gone on 1 or 2 of the 3 field trips they were going to go on for the year. So then we have to determine, you know, what percentage, you know, what amount of that money needs to be returned to parents. You know, some people have asked, well, can't we just roll it forward? You know, it's an option, but then it creates a whole nother level of bookkeeping headache and things along those lines. So that's a little bit of a challenge as we're working through it. But we're trying to go as quick as we can. But I know people are wanting to know where we are, especially with the larger fees. So,
all right. Any other questions?
Anything else related to kind of a COVID update? I mean, we'll have some things that go with what's going on, but they're actual agenda items as we work through here.
Okay. And then next up on the agenda is the 1920 school year calendar adjustment.
Yeah. So and Dave will be touching in on this as well. But you know, essentially, in talking with area school districts and other superintendents, trying to look at how do we bring this year to a close. We obviously want to continue to provide good instruction for our kids. We want to continue to work and do things that we're doing. However, we do know that because of the when you take all the kids and you put them back in homes and you don't have them come into school, that you do start to exacerbate some of the inequities. And so how do we work to mitigate those losses and those things? And so one of the things that's been talked about with other school districts that they're looking at doing, and something I wanted to talk to this group about, is potentially looking at stopping our large group instruction prior to our June 9th date, stopping it somewhere around Memorial Day, and then having our staff work on a series of professional development and also targeted interventions for kids, so that we are able to meet kids where they are, both for the summer, but then also when we come back from the school year. And so, you know, that's a big thing. You know, I just was on emails today. I think all of our area school districts that surround us have all said they're looking at either the 22nd or the 29th to be done kind of with their large group instruction, but then doing targeted instruction with kids. But what I want people to understand is that doesn't mean we would just stop everything. I mean, staff would still be working through their contract and everything else. It'd just be changing our format from where we're at now to a different look. And I don't know, Dave, if you want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, you bet. And yeah, and Nick hit on the big points. So the big deal, the big concern is, as Nick said, that this closure exacerbates existing gaps. And on top of that, there's been a gap in our professional learning. It's really hard to engage in collaborative professional learning in this environment because people's schedules don't quite match, and trying to get some of the things that we would typically be moving forward have been limited to a certain extent. So there's some stuff that would happen at all levels. As Nick said, providing direct instruction to students who need that additional support, analyzing assessment data to plan for what we would perceive or likely see as 3 different layers of support, kind of answering the 3 questions. What can we do for individual students who might need support during the last few weeks? How can we maximize the summer months? Sandy was talking about summer school. There are definitely things we can do, some on the intervention side, some on the engagement side. We know that families would appreciate some engagement. We need to plan for that. And then also, how can we leverage this time to prepare as best we can for next year? We talked about trying to maximize our transition into next year so we can hit the ground running, so elementary teachers know their class list, and then secondary teachers have their schedule with their students so they can take a look at those needs. Then the other thing is the structured PD that we'd like to, there's a lot that we've learned. Teachers have learned a ton about different ways we can engage students, some of which is really just germane to this sort of environment, other things that we could carry forward. Like what do we do in the future in a snow day, or how can we get involved in more flipped instruction? Some things we've talked about in the past. There's a lot that we can use as a springboard. And then there's some specific things by level. At the elementary, we're going to be implementing Fontes and Pinnell Classroom, which is a major literacy curricular resource at the elementary level. It's about the biggest implementation you can have in a district, a comprehensive literacy program at the elementary level. So many kids are impacted. We want to give teachers as much time as they need to adequately prepare. We think we could capitalize on some of that time there. At the secondary, we need to assess some grading practices. We need to shore up interim assessments, and then teachers will be working in their PLCs. A lot of this stuff, there are things that we were planning out. We also got feedback from TAC, and they offered some of these ideas. And then finally, we would have our curricular teams work where they are in their phases, whether they're in phase 1, 2, or 3, or beyond, to take care of those few things that they would have done if we were in school, but just wasn't possible in this environment.
Nick, you're muted.
I saw that. So one of the things that we would be asking the board is to give us kind of the leeway to make adjustments to the end of the year schedule, so that we would be looking at either a large group instruction ending the 22nd or the 29th of May, and moving into this transition model as we try to prepare kids for the summer and for next year. One of our biggest concerns obviously is once we hit that Memorial Day, it's going to be a challenge to keep kids engaged. We will have been at that point probably 9 weeks into virtual instruction, and we want to see how can we maximize our time that we have with our staff to the best of our ability so it's most effective with kids. So I guess welcome thoughts from the board.
Well, I have one question to kick it off would be, you mentioned about using that extra time that wouldn't be in large group instruction for preparation for next year. And along those lines of preparation for next year, are we anticipating that we're going to do letter grading and not give this pass-fail option if we're still doing virtual or distance learning come September 1 or whatever date is chosen as the start date? Will we be set up so that teachers can grade everybody and not do a pass-fail presumption or default, if you will?
And I can turn it over to Dave, but I mean, we haven't gotten that far down the list, but I mean, we would anticipate that if we had to start virtually next year, we'd want to maintain the ability to go with letter grades because, we might only be virtual for a couple of weeks and then we'll be in face-to-face. So it'd kind of be the flip of this. So we wouldn't want to put ourselves in a position that would minimize or our options per se. And so all of those things, although the teachers have done an absolutely outstanding job getting this thing off the ground, it take a lot of time to plan and to make sure that we're meeting everybody where they're at. Dave, I don't know if you had something.
No, I think that's absolutely it. And just to be clear, we didn't explore the pass-fail option because we didn't think we'd be able to provide letter grades. It was more about making sure that kids weren't negatively impacted. With many of the strategies and things that we have in place with the technology and just with the professional learning that's happened, I think we can do a better job of reaching out and connecting to students. But there still are several students that principals and counselors and teachers are doing their level best to keep engaged, but it's a challenge. But as Nick said, I don't think we'd want to be in a situation where we start with a pass-fail, then resume regular in-house instruction and be behind the 8 ball.
Okay. Other questions from other board members then?
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay. And well, which one? I mean, Nick's kind of looking at either the 22nd or 29th. And for me, providing a date would kind of depend on our discussion on the next agenda item, because I think if we were adjusting the start of next year earlier, I'd be more inclined to end this year earlier. But if the presumption is that we don't change next year, then I would defer to the administration and the academic experts as to whether or not we need the 9 days or not 9 days, because some of that's weekend, but all those days in June plus another week in May in order to be ready for this. Or can we do it May 29th? That would be my question. Sue, you have a question?
I don't really see them connected. Can't explain why, but it seems like we're making a decision about how to end this year with all the complications of COVID and all that. And then based on how we end this, well, I don't know. Then I think that we're going to move on to a survey, which didn't really have any questions related to how this year ended. I don't believe that they did anyway.
Right. Well, I'm not saying that they're, inextricably interwoven at all. I'm just saying in my mindset, giving up on this year or getting the students out of the virtual classroom in addition to the physical classroom earlier means that many more days that they're not in instruction and waiting until September. If I knew that time period was going to be reduced, I'd be more inclined to end this year. That's all I'm saying. Me personally, that's how I look at it. If you look at it differently, that's fine. Heather?
Yeah, I was just going to say, something else that I would support considering would be a tiered approach. I think especially, I don't have elementary students, but parents of elementary school students, I could see that they in particular might be done by the 21st or the 28th. That sounds like that's been the biggest struggle to keep meaningfully engaged is those younger kiddos. So I guess I like the idea of the getting ready, but also if we can figure out a way to use then those professional resources to somehow reach out and engage those kids that have been left behind. To me, that would be the biggest win from this approach if we thought we could do that during those couple of weeks then between the scheduled end date and what we end up going with.
I agree.
Okay. All right, Bruce agrees. Rob, you got your hand up, your mute button's on.
So Dave, question for you. Again, I don't know what I don't know as it relates to educating our kids. What's the downside to ending school on the 22nd versus the 29th?
Well, only the obvious that it's fewer days of instruction for everyone. But as we said, what happens in an environment like this, and Nick said it well, it exacerbates equity issues. So we have a lot of kids that are fully engaged and they're getting, or maybe not fully engaged, but as close to fully engaged as possible and getting a lot of support, getting what they need. And teachers only have so much time in their day or their week or the month to address all the needs for those students that might not be getting everything they need. So for the bulk, they might be getting what they need. So I guess that would be the downside, that there's that potential loss for them. Having said that, I really feel that we need to hone in on the specific needs of the students that maybe weren't as engaged as we'd like to see. And that really does, even though you're absolutely right, I think the emotional toll on the parents of elementary kids is a little stronger. There are a lot of secondary kids that are not as engaged as we'd like to see, and we need to support them as well.
So this engagement then, would we do more by leaving school intact until the 29th?
So what we view the engagement as is more direct outreach. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to spend my time as a teacher creating lessons for everyone, gathering that information, grading, doing all that stuff that goes into everyone, and focus those energies on the few students that need more. So it wouldn't be as much whole group instruction. It would be more small group and individual meetings with kids, digging into the assessment data, providing instruction for the identified gaps. If we find out, like as an example, We're going to work with a group of 4th grade students in math that are missing an essential skill that we feel is absolutely necessary for them to be successful in 5th grade. We could create some small groups and provide that instruction without being burdened with all the other stuff that goes along with instruction for all.
Thank you.
Carrie, did you have a question?
Yes, I would agree with the earlier, the May 22nd date for all the reasons stated. And also I think probably the majority of families emotionally could use, would be more heartened by that earlier date.
And yeah, I would tend to agree with that statement. My question is just, how do you handle that? So for 90% of the students, and their families, they're going to be heartened by being able to be done on May 22nd. Then how do you work with that other 10%? I don't know if it's 10% or if it's 5%, but there's significantly smaller population of people that, except for you guys are going to be in trying to catch up until June 9th.
Well, but you got to remember, Jamie, it's not necessarily that they're going to be, these kids are going to be in instruction all day long for the extra 2 weeks. I mean, it's some of it is a blend between providing direct instruction to those individuals. Some of it's going to be a blend of planning for what they need. Some of it's going to be creating some resources for these kids to use over the next 3 months of the summer so that they don't fall behind, and making sure parents have what they need that way. And so, you know, I mean, right now we do ESY services, extended school year services, for a variety of kids that need some extra things and things along the lines. Essentially what we'd be doing is kind of broadening that net per se, so that we would offer it, you know, we'd be providing more of that, I think, for more kids. And so it is a blend. I mean, there are some kids, like you said, that are going to say, well, that's not fair, but that typically has not been the response we've gotten when we've added additional support for kids, because it's usually the other piece that goes with that is that relationship piece that teachers have with kids, and really working to, you know, say, hey, I'm trying to do the best, you know, what I think is best for you. And we tend to not have as much pushback on that. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it's just, usually that's where that relationship piece comes into play.
And just to add a few things, we didn't talk a lot about it, the secondary level. So remember, we got this opt-in for grades, and we talked about the fact that it's sort of you're all in for all grades. And then we require that students finish all their summative assessments. So that time would also be used to catch up, to make sure that kids that wanted to get a grade had that opportunity. Teachers would be working with them. And then every year we have high school students that need some remediation, some extra support to be successful or to pass a class. Just because we went to pass fail, remember there's still the fail side to that. So we would also work with those students so we don't end up with students that end up credit deficient because of the school closure. So it's just another thing that we would like to be able to more directly address.
And you mentioning that pass fail reminded me, so then if we were to move it up to May 22nd, that would move up the decision date these students have to May 15th.
That is correct. You have 1 week before whatever day we decide to stop with the whole group instruction stuff.
Heather?
Yeah, so Nick and Dave, I know a few meetings ago I asked about the possibility that we could use the summer school structure to do some of that work with kids who fell behind. And I know there was a concern about transportation, which is a money concern, but is that still something that we could look into, is really leveraging that? I mean, that still gives those kids a little bit of a break, and then they have the summer school opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that's the summer school piece, because one of the things that the state is working on is right now, you can do virtual summer school in grades 7 through 12, but only for courses that are high school credit courses. So they're going through what's called a scope statement down at the state to make a rule change to allow us to do virtual summer school, basically K-12. The problem with that is after you've done 10 weeks of virtual school, it's kind of like, really, do you want to do some more virtual summer school? And so one of the things that we would hope to be able to do is to be able to do more targeted, once we can do that face-to-face intervention stuff as well, to try to see if we can, you know, be a little bit more aggressive than what we've even been in the past, to bring those kids in and do some of those things. And there may absolutely be some funding associated with that, with this COVID funding, that may say, okay, because of this crisis, you know, we needed to bring kids in for additional kind of compensatory time, in the summer. We wanted to make sure they got here, so we had to provide transportation. So there's costs associated with that. We may be able to find, there may be some additional funding associated with that, because we really do. We really want to make sure we don't have this huge dip. And and I think in some of the emails I think you got from parents, some people reference, well, everybody's going to be in the same boat. Everybody's going to have a dip, so we'll be fine. Well, I mean, yes and no. Some dips are going to be way worse than others, and the thing is nobody really wants to just take the dip. I mean, you don't want to lose the ground, and so that's where I think we really want to try to do the best we can, and that's where I think you'll see a more robust. We're going to try to have even more robust summer school program if we can do more face-to-face instruction. One of the things that we are limited to in our summer school program, and we put the call out to, we talked about it at TAC last week, is it's about instructors. I mean, we got to get people willing to teach summer school in order to do these things. It's not mandated in people's contracts. And so, trying to get more and more people to do it so that we can offer more and more items for summer school. But yeah, there's absolutely all of those. It's kind of we're trying to look at this from an all of above approach, trying to look at it from a bunch of different angles. And, the 22nd or the 29th is really the difference between the 22nd and 29th is, Jamie, is we come back from Memorial Day weekend, is that those 4 days that week going to be better spent? Are staff going to utilize that time better than, when they can target things for individual kids or plan for those targets than if we're still trying to deliver some level of instruction for the last couple of days? And so, our recommendation would be probably to go to the 22nd with large group instruction, if you guys are comfortable with that, and then doing the targeted intervention and staff professional development for the remainder of the days.
And just to follow up on Jamie's comment, I do think if there's a way that it can be messaged that it's not like, okay, most of you have a good summer, except some of you have 2 more weeks of school left. If it can be have a good summer, and some of you are going to hear from us some more because this summer we're going to be working together to figure out how we can support you. I mean, I think it's a good point, Jamie. We don't want it to feel punitive to those kids who already have struggled so much with this online format. Yeah.
And another thing, there's, we talk about the 90 and 10%. There's also a percentage of our families who really want more instruction, more material, more opportunity to keep their kids engaged. So one of the approaches we could take is we could still offer optional to everyone. So there could be a menu of optional things to keep a student engaged if the family so chose, and then we would reach out for the targeted instruction. So we wouldn't really be saying, see ya, we'd just be saying now the required work for the bulk is no longer, and we've got our focused work and then our menu of options for others.
Thanks for adding that. I think that's important, yeah. Bruce, I'm sorry. Okay.
My apologies. I agree. I think that's great.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Yes,
so we'll vote on this officially at the action meeting. Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start putting out messaging, but yeah, then, I mean, basically if we have consensus from the board, then you guys, can, I mean, we're not cutting student contact days. We're just adjusting how we're going to deliver instruction for the last 2 weeks of school. So our calendar, for the sake of calendar, is not changing. It's just how we're choosing to deliver instruction. And Carrie had a comment, I think.
I had a question for Dave. When you mentioned the students who would need those extra 2 weeks to pass a class, for the ones who did opt for a grade, could they also have that 2 weeks to hopefully bring whatever grades up to where they want them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And the teachers would know which kids had selected that, so they could work directly with them as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Anything else on that subject? And I forgot to announce earlier, I think we could have possibly a planned break somewhere between 7 and 7:30. So I don't know how far we're going to get through the agenda, but next up is the 2021 calendar and the survey that was sent out to folks. Nick, do you want to just start that discussion?
Yep. Okay. So when we surveyed parents, there's basically 2 things that we wanted to know, and that's why there were very limited questions on it. Is 1, do you have interest in starting before our original start date of September 1? And 2, if you do, well, I guess there's kind of 3 things. If you do, what would be your preference, and and rank order, but also when would you be available? Because some people might say, yeah, it's fine to go ahead and start, but my kids I'm not going to be available until this date. And really, when we started to look at the survey results, we had great responses. Our response rate, I think Tracy sent it out at 6 p.m. last Monday, and by 10 o'clock Monday night, I think I called her. I said, can you believe this? We already have 2,000 responses. I think we finally closed it on Friday, and you can, see the results. What we were looking for primarily for to make a recommendation was an overwhelming kind of mandate of what to do. Because one of the things that happens if we change the calendar this late in the game, it creates some challenges with our staff, because they may have already planned vacations or weddings or things like that. And so all of a sudden it could have an impact, an impact on them. And so it was one of those things where, hey, if we had a strong amount of people that really, your parents are just like, yes, let's start early, then we'd go down that route. And so really what we did is we looked at the different levels and what were people's first choices and through fifth choices. And so the first choice, if you go to the second box, essentially it's percentage. That's probably the easiest way to look at things. It basically matches with what's up above, except it's percentages. So we looked at all the people that filled out the survey and what their first choice was. And basically 47% of the parents that filled out the survey, their first choice was to keep September 1st as our start date. And there was about 53% of the parents, when you add up all of the other dates, that said, hey, any date before September 1st, not necessarily any date, but a date before September 1st. Well, although 53 is obviously greater than 47, to me, it's for administratively, it'd be really hard for us to really blow up the system in an apple cart to not have a more clear mandate to do so. So that's where our recommendation would be, to keep the school start date on September 1 as the calendar is set. And people will ask, why would you want to move it anyway? Well, there's a couple things that we were worried about. Is one, 5.5 months from the time they were in school to the time, they're in school again. And two, we don't know what next fall is going to bring us. We don't know what next fall or next spring is going to bring us. And the thought was, the more days of instruction, face-to-face instruction we could have before we get potentially disrupted, we thought would be for the better. And that was kind of the rationale behind those things. We may not get shut down at all next year. We may have to start virtually next year. I mean, that's one of the challenges with this situation, is we don't know. And, we're sitting here trying to plan for something that has totally opposite, endings. And so that was kind of the rationales we talked through with you guys a few weeks back. I think it was the April 6th board meeting when we talked about surveying the community. And so, as it sits, the administration's recommendation is to recommend that we keep the start date as is, because there's just not enough to get us over the hump to say, hey, we're going to kind of blow up the system to start a week or two early.
And maybe this is an agenda item where we can catch up some ground, given this is the administration's recommendation, but I'll still let other board members, if you guys want to have some speeches on this, and we can go ahead and do that. So if anybody wants to talk about, and yes, Bruce.
Yeah, so, I like seeing the data, so I appreciate getting the information back and hearing from the community. I think that's really important for us. I think we've done that for years, and I don't know that we need to change that now. My question is, much like what we're trying to attempt for the summer, is there anything we could offer for those parents that may want kids to come back a little early, even if it's to do a recap from the year before, to go into next year? Because it is such a, one, it's such a long gap. Two, kids are probably not gonna take the information as much as they would had they been in classroom settings. So, part of my question to that, and I know it's a hindrance on our teachers, and I'm not really sure logistically how to make it happen, but I'm just curious, you think about math, right? Could someone get a recap of last year's information so that they come into the year a little bit, fresh, and they've had a teacher working with them versus, them having to be disciplined enough to go through it themselves, to be able to take on some of these higher level classes that, they're going to take, particularly, in the high school level, but also in the middle school. I mean, we're advancing them through in times where it's most critical for them to get some of those basic skills of reading, writing, and math down. So I don't know what our options are there, but for those parents that may want to partake in something like that, is there any option there?
Yeah, Bruce, and that's exactly what we're kind of talking about, is kind of the all above approach. And what it'll take is, it'll take more teachers willing to do summer school. I think that's the big piece. We may have to kick around the idea, and I haven't even run this by Tim or Andrea, and they're probably like, oh my God, what's he going to say? But, we may have to try to look at, raising what we pay even at summer school. I mean, I think we pay a pretty competitive rate, but maybe we got to raise it even more to try to get more people. But, typically at the high school level, we haven't done that. We've done those type of summer school at the elementary level where they have a very academic focused second session of summer school. And it might be that, we could look at doing that at the high school level if we can get enough staff to kind of on board with it. And I think it's definitely something that we could look at. Sandy's never going to be allowed to retire. She's just going to just keep on working all the way through. She just, come into that.
Absolutely.
But Dave, if you have other things you want to hit on that, or Sandy.
But I would say that, yeah, Bruce, it's a really good point, and I think it ties right back to what we said about ending the year. If we end the year and we have some time to make sure the transition is strong and teachers feel comfortable, like, okay, I'm ready for next year, that increases the likelihood that those same teachers say, and I might be able to take on this summer school thing because I've had this time to really prepare for next year. So it all fits together. Nick is exactly right. Teacher recruitment is the biggest issue. And then that time to plan to make it meaningful that's what we need to take a look at. I would love to be able to extend our summer school and have it be very targeted. The challenge, of course, is not just recruiting teachers for the typical time. It's when you push closer and closer to the time that they all come back for the regular school year, it becomes less likely that we're going to get as much. But we've actually talked to principals already, and we'll continue to do that, just to keep that in front of our teachers and do our best to recruit as many as possible.
Okay, Sue?
I was just going to say I had a little bit of a chat with Nick, and I like the idea that we're going to start, September 1st, and I do think the survey gave us a lot of supportive data. But anyway, I asked Nick about, or Nick commented that, I believe you did, that the teachers had some input on the idea of keeping the date September 1st or starting earlier. Is that true? And how are they feeling about the dates? Can you comment on that?
So, teachers were given the same survey as parents, and we did not do demographic information on the survey. We wanted to keep it kind of quick and simple, and maybe that's why we got so many responses because it was such a short survey. But, I think, our staff really wants to, I think they want to get back to normal. They want to get back to instructing kids face to face, whether that's September 1st or a little bit earlier. I think the biggest challenge with staff is just even if we start early, even September 1st, I think teachers actually first day is, Dave, do you happen to know what teachers' first day is for this current calendar?
For this upcoming year, it would be September 1st is first day for teachers, I'm sorry. Or 26th would be the first, August 26th.
August 26th. So, and then new teachers have another 3 days ahead of that.
Yeah. So the 21st for brand new teachers.
21st for brand new teachers. So when we start sliding that stuff forward, it can really start to impact things that they may have planned. I think that the thing that's important about this is the likelihood of us being at business as usual in August is not very good. I mean, it's just, we're hoping that they're going to make exceptions so we can do things with face-to-face summer school and things like that. But I know, some people even in their emails said, that's when we're going to have all of our summer vacations and we're going to be doing this stuff. I mean, unless things take a dramatically different turn than the way they've been going, we could potentially still be in some level of restriction well into August, September. I mean, we're even hearing from health officials that, we might only be in phase 2 by October, which may not allow, certain vacations and certain things to happen and stuff like that. So, as we continue to work through this, I think teaching staff, they're troopers, they will do what they need to do, but I think they probably would breathe a sigh of relief keeping it September 1st, especially those that may have scheduled some vacations and potentially maybe not even full vacations, just getaways sometime towards middle or late August.
Bob.
Sorry, trying to unmute. Yeah, I would agree. I'm pleased that we're keeping it at September 1st. Nick said, teachers want to get back to normal, and I had questioned as we come back early and plans have been made with vacations, and we give them the opportunity. Well, your child will be excused for those. How normal is that for a teacher to have, possibly 2, 3, 4 kids out of a class at a time at different parts to this extra potential month that we would have started? So I guess I would just go back to that Parent We Salute You letter, which from Tracy, I believe, or those involved, a wonderful job that resonated with many parents from what I heard. We will meet your children wherever they are. We will get them to where they need to be. And that's something every teacher will probably tell you they do every year. So I just think there's a lot of challenges with moving this early. Again, not knowing where we're going to be, just too many things to look at. To me, getting back to normalcy will be September 1st. So I hope we can do that. Thank you.
Jamie, I just wanted to into since folks might be watching this and acknowledge, we did get communications from parents, very eloquent, research-based communications supporting moving earlier because they recognized the science behind the summer slide and they were very aware of, what this extra couple of months could mean, especially for kids, but not only for kids who are struggling with home learning. And so I just think, that it's very clear from the survey results that the majority of families wanted to stick with that September 1 date. And we are still acknowledging, our team is still acknowledging that, if it's 80-20 or whatever, there's a good chunk of kids who have not been learning just fine throughout this whole period. And whether we start early or not, our staff is going to have some heavy lifting to do to help get those kids caught up. And so I just think that we as a board and hopefully the community at large is going to be supportive of the other ways then that we that we and our teachers and our teams work to support those kids, because they're going to need the lift. If we start September 1, they're not going to come back ready to go. We're going to need to figure out different ways to support them, different than having an earlier start date. So I think that's just important to acknowledge.
All right, Bob, back to you.
Yeah, and just again, I think my opinion of the start date would be different perhaps if we didn't jump on the distance learning as fast as we did. The great job of everyone involved with that. There are districts out there that just started last week or a week and a half ago. So that has a lot to do with it too. I think we have done wonderful things to make this work under terrible circumstances. And I think everyone's doing a great job.
All right. Anything else on that topic? Otherwise, next up is the Hudson High School Activities Code changes for 2021.
I'll turn it over to Erin for that.
Yep. So I'll turn it over to Erin in a second. So we have Erin Mon, Assistant Activities Director, joining us to kind of highlight a couple of the changes to the Activities Code of Conduct.
He's actually our full Activities Director now.
Oh, sorry.
I've heard that a couple times today, that my title still says Assistant AD, so I might leave it that way. I get asked less questions.
Sorry, Erin.
No, that's all right. you know, a couple things. Thank you. I was bummed to miss the March meeting, but we're excited to welcome our third daughter into the picture. Tegan's doing well. And I side with Heather's point of the elementary school parents. My wife's maternity leave has been flipped upside down, in short. So I know we're feeling that here, but we appreciate everything that the teachers have done. So, but I'll get started on the code of conduct. I think the visioning piece of it up front to give people context of what this document should be is important. Not everybody's favorite talking point, but it really should serve as a support system to help these student athletes through. Usually it's a mistake where code of conduct comes into the picture, or more support is needed. And that's really what this document should serve as. And what we try and look at when we're making these reviews is where can we not only do that, but also clarify and make it easier to understand. Two main areas that we addressed this year as you look through it, and every change that we made is highlighted in red at that in yellow at that document that you're looking at. I'll begin with attendance. Our attendance used to state that students had to be in the school day hours 5 through 8. Really in our discussions, we wanted to develop a sense of consistency and an approach towards we expect our students to be whole students. I wouldn't say we saw an overwhelming pattern of students missing first, second, third, or fourth hour, but it just didn't sit right to say that you can be gone these hours a little bit easier, must be approved prior to in order to miss hours 5 through 8. We studied a lot of districts. Some still stick with the second half of the day, but we really seem to come across a lot of examples that in the full day approach made a lot of sense. We expect these students to be student athletes, and part of that is expecting them to be there from the start of the school day. They still have an opportunity to be pre-excused. It's no different than any other student in gaining an excused absence. But I think, again, it just refocuses on all 8 hours of our day are very important. And they have very different classes throughout the day, and prioritizing one half of the day does not seem fair to those second half of classes.
Eric, did you hear regarding that proposed change? I mean, one of the things I wonder about is if you have more students coming to school sick. I mean, thinking back more years than I would like to admit, there were mornings where you get up and you go, I don't feel very good. And you go back to bed for 2 or 3 hours. And then sometimes you're sick all day, and sometimes you get up in 2 hours and you feel better and you go to school and you play that night. I mean, so I wonder if the inclination of athletes would be, they're going to go to school in the morning, whether they feel good or not, because they don't want to, run the chance of feeling better by 5 o'clock and then not being able to play or practice.
Yeah, and that was one of the scenarios we talked about. What makes it difficult is there's two sides to that. Are they tired? They may be tired. There's a lot of students that are participating in other things, and those first hour classes are important to be at, we believe. But would they be sick in that situation? We were concerned about that opportunity in itself and what we would be exposing them to if we were allowing them to sleep in, saying they weren't feeling well, and then come and participate in the afternoon and spreading those types of sicknesses. I think especially with what we're dealing with now is just being cognizant of what we're asking our student athletes to do. I personally believe that if they're not feeling well enough to come to the school day, I would rather have them not come to that extracurricular activity. Any other questions specific? I can keep going through all of it unless people have specific questions on attendance.
And are you just like letting us know which section you're on as you go through the highlighted items?
Yeah. So the attendance piece is on page 4 of the code of conduct. So it highlights in yellow what we changed. So that is the piece where we switched to the entire school day. The rest is part of our school attendance policy. So then if you go down to
the top of page 5.
Go. What we implemented here was just a refocus and clarification. So we found it important to just make sure that it was laid out. If it happens out of season, these student athletes are expected to follow the code of conduct 365 days a year. It's important that they complete that entire season in good standing. This issue clarifies, or this language clarifies, if a student were to pick up a sport to serve a penalty. We talked about the pros and cons of this. Some schools do enact a policy where it does not allow students to pick up an activity that they hadn't participated in prior to that code of conduct violation. We see there's pros in that as well. We're getting them involved with another program, another coach, another advisor, whoever that may be. And by doing that, yes, they're serving their penalty sooner than they had originally planned, but now we have 75% of their season where they're able to participate, learn new skills, learn from a new adult role model in our district. But this just helps clarify that we're not going to accept it if they were to go out for a fall activity, participate in 25% of it, and not show up again. We do feel it's very important for them to complete that season, just like every other student would in that situation.
Bob,
Yeah.
Bob has a question on that.
So my only concern with that is with the large amount of students in our high school and few opportunities to be on a team or spots open for varsity or what have you, is there any concern that someone picking up a sport in the earlier season so they can ensure that they can be on the basketball team for the full season? I mean, shouldn't we be looking at that a little bit as well?
Yeah, and again, I should clarify, this isn't a new policy. We didn't change. We didn't originally have the language in here, and it's been common practice it's been past practice to not stop them from registering. What I felt the need to clarify was that we expect them to continue that season. I think we've had some situations in the past where students have gone and participated in an event and maybe not done the best in terms of having regular attendance, participating in the team. As far as how many times this happens, we're in a unique case right now where we have a higher number of code of conduct violations going into next year, but we don't see an immense amount of these. So I don't envision it impacting starting spots or varsity spots or cuts or somebody new being added to the mix.
Okay, any other questions on that one?
I guess, Aaron, a related question. How do we handle code of conduct violations for students who would have served, a junior, who would have missed this spring season and then would have been able to play next spring season, but they didn't have the chance to miss this spring season?
And that's something we're working through right now. That's tough. The WIA right now, their current statement is that any code of conduct violation must be pushed to the fall. And that's not something that the individual schools have any ability to manipulate. I know there are many schools with questions out there on if this can be discussed. This came out in our most recent press release from the WIA talking about the July contact days, because it does end up being a loss of the spring season and then a loss of the beginning of the fall. But the other side of the coin is all of those other students lost their spring season as well. So either side has an argument, but the current statement from the WIA is that all penalties will be served in the fall that were supposed to be served in the spring. Okay, if we go down to the bottom of page 8, we get to our scholastic area. Yep. Did somebody have a question? No, okay. We identified our grade reporting period. And this did change from quarter all the way through quarter 1, quarter 2, 3, and 4 to quarter 1, semester 1, quarter 3, and semester 2. We ran into some inequities in this where, and I'll provide an example. We had one student fail 4th quarter and one student fail 2nd semester. Now in our code of conduct, which you'll see farther down if you look in detail, is they can take summer school to provide that credit recovery as far as their grade and be able to regain eligibility shall they pass that course in the summer. Now that's only available if you fail a semester. So that student that went and did the summer school regained eligibility. The student that failed quarter 4 could not regain eligibility because of that. So it provided us a little bit more consistency to be able to handle those different types of situations that will come up. The next piece you'll see, and this change came 2 years ago, we switched from 1 failing grade to 2 failing grades. And what we discussed this time was, what are we doing to help them realize prior to 2 failing grades that we need to get them back on track? I think we would all agree we'd like to see our students have no failing grades, but things do happen. So what we put in, we did not go back to 1 failing grade to become ineligible, but rather we went with 1 failing grade. They must, at minimum for 3 consecutive weeks, work with that coach or advisor to do a grade report, find some tutoring, scheduled teacher support, academic Wednesday, whatever it may be. And that is a relationship and connection that's going to be expected between the student athlete and the coach. And then if they were to pick up a 2nd failing class, that's when they would become ineligible. So that doesn't change from last year to this year. If you move farther down to the top of page 9, this is just a clarification. So this did not change, but what we did do is we clarified what's defined as a school day in terms of extracurricular activities. So we defined a school day as a regular scheduled school day, practice, or event. So that could be a Saturday or a holiday break where an activity is scheduled. And the reason being is so many of our activities are on the weekend, and if we don't account for that, there becomes an inequity between sports that may not have their sports on weekends, and it spreads out their time span of their 15 days. So then they regain their eligibility on that 16th day. For out of season, this is a situation we ran into where it was a little bit more difficult to apply. That scheduled period, we defined the start day of that on the first scheduled event. So the reason it becomes difficult to apply is the first part of your season is all practices. So if a student was to start the season with a scholastic penalty versus having one happen maybe right before playoffs, like a spring sport would have, they're not missing many activities because only one of their weeks essentially is being penalized. Because during their suspension, we do expect them to practice and maintain contact with their team in practicing and being a part of every other activity other than their games. That was a lot. Does anybody have questions specific to the scholastic portion?
Aaron, I have a question. I think I'm misunderstanding what you said in A. If you have a failing grade, you need to seek additional academic support. And then I thought you said that you wouldn't automatically be ineligible unless you had more than 1 failing grade. But B states a student who receives 1 or more is ineligible for 15 scheduled school days. Is I guess which is correct? So they have to seek additional academic support and they're ineligible?
That should be 2 or more, sorry.
Okay, so
so
B should state 2 or more?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So yes, when there's 1 failing grade, we enact the support system that minimum of 3 weeks. When there is 2 or more, that's when they become ineligible, but then they're still expected to provide that support during that time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Okay. If we go down to the page 11 into 12, we have our suspension penalty chart. Now, there were a lot of differing opinions on this, but really good discussion. And again, back to what creates the most fair opportunity for our students. And the language says nearest whole number. What we had is these numbers that were in yellow were actually one higher. So if we look at the penalty in a 9-game season, so football, for example, a 25% penalty was previously a 3-game penalty. So when we get into that, that's a 33% penalty. When we get into a basketball season where they may have 24 games, that's a 6-game penalty. That's exactly 25. Where you get into the math of it, the football season is not half of 24, but their penalty is half of the penalty that basketball serves. So we tried to have a balance in where that number falls so that one specific sport with a schedule with less numbers usually gets penalized more than the sport with more numbers, because the numbers fall a little bit more evenly when you start breaking down the percentages. So these numbers in yellow were all bumped down 1 game as you move up. So at the 5, 9, 13, 17, and 21 game marks, those were bumped down because they were under the 0.5 of the next number, if that makes sense.
So Aaron, it seems like what you're saying, and I think to eliminate confusion, we should eliminate the word up above the numbering of 11, because previously we had rounded them up to the nearest whole number, and now we are rounding them to the nearest whole number.
To the nearest.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Aaron.
Yeah.
Based on the logic, the math you just said, with 9 games, the 3 went to a 2. With 6 games, why would the 2 not go to a 1? Because that's a third also.
With
because
what?
half numbers because half numbers round up.
But on the 25%, 25%, a 2-game suspension for 6 games would be 33%. Just as a 3-game suspension for 9 games would be 33%. Maybe I misunderstood what you had just said, what the numbers had been.
So the numbers, if we say 9, the number was 3, which was 33%. And what we were trying to do was not over penalize students as much as possible. So that does go under. But when we get to it, 9 is at 2.25 when you do 25%. So that rounds down to 2.
Yeah, that makes sense. Previously, we were saying if it's anything above the number, we're rounding it up to the next number. And now we're saying if it's below 0.5, we're going to actually round it down. We're going to round it to the nearest whole number. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Any further questions about the rounding and the changing of the numerals or any other changes that were discussed? All right. Hearing none. Thank you, Aaron, for your, and this would be an action item then at the next meeting, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So next up, we have the virtual charter school contract, and there's a handy executive summary. I've clicked that up, but Dave, is this yours?
Yep, yes, I'll take that. Yep, and big thank you to Sarah Engstrom Wide. She put together this nice executive summary. She continues to do a great job with the virtual school. So at the last meeting, I presented a status update on our Hudson Virtual Charter School process. And since then, we've had our first governance board meeting. It was a fun night. I'm sure you were all tuned in. We're doing it live stream too. So probably just a review. But I want to make sure that we take a chance to thank our governance board members. So President Stan Sias, Vice President Peter Jones, Secretary Shelley Tugas, and Treasurer Melissa Harris. They are awesome, super positive, committed group of community members. We're very fortunate to have their leadership and support as we go through this process. So the entire contract is attached, but our goal tonight is give you an opportunity to review the contract, offer any insight or suggestions, and ask questions that you might have. We'll then make those adjustments, share the changes with the governance board members, and then bring the contract back for your consideration at the next board meeting. So in that executive summary, I just wanted to highlight a few things that would be of special interest to you. So first, with the admission process. So this is the Hudson Virtual Charter School would be open to both Hudson resident students and non-resident open enrolled students in grades 9 through 12. And that's sort of an interesting thing because we've said a few times that the reason we want to engage in this virtual charter process is to allow open enrolled students in to a virtual setting. But regular resident students can also apply. They would work with their counselor to talk about what the advantages and disadvantages would be. Honestly, when we get down into the academics, you'll see there really isn't a big difference because they're very similar programs. So the open enrollment process is totally separate, but is connected to the admission process for the virtual school. And then once a student would be admitted, the family would meet with Sarah, the virtual school coordinator, and other district staff to determine the best possible plan for the student. We're doing this currently with our virtual school students, and I think it's the highlight of our process. Sarah and the counselors at the high school and middle school do an amazing job of sitting down with families and talking through what would make the most sense for the program. We would see that process continuing with the virtual charter school. Then moving on into academics, our goal is to offer a comparably rigorous program to our current high school program. We don't want to create a situation where we have essentially lowered our standards in the virtual world. We want comparable standards. And we would continue to offer our full catalog through Wisconsin Virtual School, but we will continue to develop our in-house, our own courses in-house with our teachers. Looking forward to that process. We actually have a few that we've started already and it's going very well. HVCS students would earn a regular Hudson High School diploma after completion of the requirements. Right now, the requirements are outlined in the contract. That probably is not necessary because the requirements would always be the same, and we make that clear that whatever the graduation requirements are on site, they would match for the most part. With a few minor variations, they would match in the virtual world. And then moving on to the finances. So operational funds, we would operate the same way we essentially do at the school, where there'd be a per pupil allocation. There will be more detail fleshed out in the handbook. So once we have hopefully the charter agreement signed between you, the Board of Education, and the governance board, then we'd work on creating a handbook that would spell out some more of the details. But right now we have it set that it would be at a rate no less than the established per pupil allocation for Hudson High School. The reason we say no less, if we end up with, say, 2 open enrolled students, obviously the per pupil allotment wouldn't be enough for some of the basic functioning, maybe some of the marketing that they might do. So we'll work through that process again in the handbook. And then we look to have this be a 3-year term for the contract. In the contract, it lays out the details how we would address any shortcomings in the contract. And I think that's enough for me for the general overview. Just open up to any thoughts, questions, anything you might have.
Okay, Sue, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. I don't have the whole document in front of me. I just have my question, but under Roman numeral 3, item 4, acquiring property, what does that mean? Like off-campus location for something? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna turn that one to Tim. Tim has helped out with some of the details that relate to finances and operation, and that was one that we worked through with Tim and Shayna Lewis on the specifics. It likely is a non-issue. We don't see it likely coming up, but Tim, do you have the contract in front of you so you could address that one?
I don't, but what we added there, Sue, was to acquire property with the Board of Education approval. So it could be done, but they'd have to come back to the Board of Education to take the action.
So you just wanted to make sure an outside item like that, if it's surfaced, it's in the contract.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it speaks to a larger issue with the way this contract is structured. We want to make sure that we're providing the flexibility for the governance board to do their work in providing the best possible educational experience for kids, but not to be overly involved in the operations of the district. Obviously, there's a relationship there, but you're the Board of Education. You make the major decisions for the school district. The governance board would be working more on the program for virtual students. This is set up as what's called an instrumentality charter, which means that this charter doesn't hire anyone. And yes, they could seek grants for fundraising and that sort of thing, but they wouldn't have a large operating budget based on the per pupil allocation. So we just want to make sure that we're keeping safeguards in place. To that, I didn't mention this and I probably should. So right now, Sarah and then Aaron and myself are technically on the governance board. We're non-voting members on the governance board. Over time, we would remove ourselves from that governance board. So we want to make sure that the contract is very clean and very clear and doesn't grant any authority that could go awry in the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So that was the executive summary, and we're actually approving the contract.
Jamie?
At the next meeting?
Jamie?
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question. Sorry.
I saw your
yeah. With regards to the revenue, so a student then enrolls, they become a full-time student, and then this revenue then comes from the state, or where does the revenue come from?
Yeah, just as any other open enrolled student, they become one of our students and they're figured into the overall aid formula.
Do you have any idea how many students we might be looking at based on whatever business plan you might have put together? Just curious.
So this first year, not many. Reason being, the timing wouldn't allow for the regular open enrollment. It would only be the alternate open enrollment window. So not many, but we wanted to prepare, we wanted to launch and get ready. I would say if we would get 4 or 5, we'd be very thrilled. More importantly, we want to recapture all of the students that are resident students. So this will allow for some more marketing and some more PR around what we're able to offer virtually to hopefully bring back even more. We've done quite a few, we brought quite a few back this year. We hope to bring even more back.
This might be an unfair question, but do you happen to have any idea? Waukesha has a wonderful virtual program. Do you have any idea how many virtual students they have by chance?
I don't know the exact number, but I know it's a ton. That's a massive program drawing from a pretty wide geographic range. We've talked to them a few times about a few different issues here and there. But yeah, I don't know the number, but it's a very, very robust program. Their program was designed to be a growth program. At this point, our primary purpose in this program is to, again, provide the best possible education for our resident students, and then a great experience, likely for some regional kids that we think would benefit from being part of the Hudson School District, not necessarily that big statewide umbrella that Waukesha is approaching. That might come in the future if that's the guidance that we receive from the board. That's something we could definitely pursue in the future, but that's not the way it's designed at this point.
Thank you.
Any other questions of board members? But again, this will be an action item next month, Nick.
Great, Jamie.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes.
This is a great start. The executive summary reads very well. Thank you for all the work on that. Just curious if we have any data on how many students we're losing for open enrollment out of the district to online programs like this, and do we think that it will have an opportunity to improve some of our numbers there? if you don't have an answer today, that's fine, but maybe at the next meeting, just to maybe provide an update on that.
Sure, yeah, we can provide an update. I have an anecdotal answer. I mean, we've cut into that number considerably just in this first year. So if we have leveled essentially balanced out our open enrollment out and open enrollment in. This virtual school wasn't the only thing that led to that. There were other things that you've done as a board in terms of policy and open enrollment that helped that, but the virtual school definitely helped. We have a lot of students that would have considered going to a different virtual school if we had not had one. And we have several students that were in other virtual schools that we brought back into the Hudson School District, but I can get you specific numbers.
Okay, great. Any other questions? All right, seeing, hearing none, move on to the board retreat format and date. Nick?
Okay, so as we kind of look at this, originally we had a board retreat scheduled for June 6th. The question would be, do you guys want to continue to have that scheduled if we're not able to meet face to face? Would you want to potentially push that back until we can get to, more face to face meetings? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, Sue's got a thought.
Yeah, I kind of favor having it down the road or something. I look back at my notes of what we did last time, and we had big discussions on what the board does and what the administration does and so on. I think I've forgotten a lot of that. I could probably use a retreat for a refresher on what my role is and how it works hand in hand with administration. But in any event, I guess given all the kind of new focused work we have right now, I wouldn't mind if we, maybe postpone it for a while.
Okay, and is that regardless of whether the current order is extended a second time or if we're allowed to meet in groups of 10?
I would prefer we could meet 6 feet apart in a big circle, but I don't know. I'm kind of doubting that we'll be phased into that by the time the 6th comes up.
All right, others? Bruce, you had a thought?
Yeah, face to face. Whatever that timing is, I don't know what it is, but I prefer face to face for that sort of visioning / retreat. It's much more productive.
But just again, Nick's trying to get guidance from board members so that if there's not an extension of the stay-at-home order and we're at a same place we were, March 16th when we last met, and we were in the ASC room, conference room, and we were all in our own table. Are people fine with meeting in that format? That's right.
I would,
yeah,
if I weigh in, I would, go ahead.
I was just say, if we can be face to face, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Jamie, just throwing in a couple of cents or 2 cents. I would also prefer to meet in person. If we have an agenda and there's some specific things that make sense for us to meet virtually and have that retreat, so be it. But if there's not really an agenda quite yet, then certainly my preference would be to meet in person.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot of meet in person and nods of the head. Carrie, do you have something to add?
I would just say, obviously meet in person, but also I think probably the district has a lot more important things right now to focus on than a board retreat. So I would be in favor of postponing it, even if, we could meet the guidelines and meet at that time, but certainly July or August or whenever might make more sense.
I'm open to whatever you guys want.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, Jamie, maybe we have a pre-retreat Zoom where we just discuss kind of what do we want to get done with the retreat, to really, to Rob's point, to clarify what the agenda is going to be. I mean, when I think back to the work we did last year, we were up and moving around and putting Post-it notes on things. And so, I mean, I think, you know, we can sit 6 feet apart, but that wouldn't have worked with what we had to get done last year. So I think it would be important to understand what the agenda is and how we're proposing working through the agenda before I would feel comfortable saying, yeah, we could do it in person on June 6th, as long as we're sitting 6 feet apart or not. But yeah.
All right. Sue?
Well, and to Heather's point, when we finally did get to the retreat, by that time we had done bits and pieces of reading and discussion in that book that we had. And so it kind of led up to the retreat, as I recall. So, you know, yeah, either we have some homework before we get together, but I guess I'm more in line with Carrie. Let's find a date down the road and be face to face.
Okay, well, I think that's an excellent point, Sue, about the doing some reading beforehand. So, and Heather's point about having an actual agenda in front of us before we decide this. So my goal will be to try to flesh that out a little bit, what the content of the retreat might be and so forth. And if the governor changes things again, that probably will decide it for us, because we've got a pretty good consensus. We want to meet in person, and we'll strive to do that. But me personally, I'm very hesitant to postpone it, because I think if we postpone it, we just won't have it for a whole year. It'll be highly likely that we won't get together in July or August. At least that's my preference. I would rather spend the first Saturday of July or August doing something else. But again, if we can't meet, we can't meet. And if we don't have great content or some homework to do ahead of time, then I don't see a point in meeting either, just to meet. So, all right. Then, let's see, it's now, what, 7:18? Do people need to take a break? I've seen people get up and move around a little bit. We're halfway through the agenda, but I think we're through the half that was going to take the longest amount of time. Would you agree, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, we have some things with the closed session and things. So, I mean, what we can do is take a quick 5-minute break. Ryan Delacroix can put up a graphic that will go on the YouTube feed. And then when we're ready to reconvene, you know, we take it down and reconvene. So if you want to take a 5-minute recess for people to kind of freshen drinks and go to the bathroom, that'd be fine.
All right, very good. We'll stand recess for 5 minutes. It's 7:24, then we'll come back. All right, thanks.
I think we're ready when you are, Jamie.
All right, now we can resume the meeting. And next up on our agenda is the Chromebook purchase and lease.
I'm gonna turn that over to Tim Erickson. Tim, you're muted.
Let's try it again. Okay, I thought I had my space bar hit up to work, but apparently not. So we're moving into our second lease agreement for Chromebooks. Our first one was done 4 years ago, and we ordered about 3,500 Chromebooks last time. This time we're somewhere in the neighborhood of looking at ordering about 3,300. We've got, there's quite a bit of pressure on Chromebooks. As you can imagine, schools around the nation are gearing up and ordering Chromebooks. I think we heard that New York had ordered about 300,000. So we're trying to move this along quickly so that we can get into the pipeline and get ours ordered and get them here on time. Jen Lotze's here tonight as well. She'll answer any questions that you've got regarding the purchase. And I'll run through the lease agreement or the lease results. We're as far as the Chromebook proposals themselves, we had a number of proposals. You can see that on the sheet, and we're recommending Trinity 3 technology option. It's option number 2, which is a Lenovo unit. And Trinity came in with some good pricing. They're also going to provide spares for no additional charge. And they will also provide a 4-year unlimited warranty, including battery replacement for that price included. And then we would also purchase down below that second highlighted green area would be the Chromebook case. So again, 3,300, it's about $1,053,000. So we'll open it up to questions if you have any.
Sue?
Tim, so when we ordered Chromebooks the first time, we always made sure there were enough extras to have in classrooms in case a student's died on them or something, the student wouldn't be interrupted in helping to complete work. Will we be planning for extras for classrooms too?
Yes, that would be the same case, and I'll let Jen talk to that.
Yeah, so we actually, after our first year on the lease that we're living in right now, we actually went to a centralized space with our technical staff in each of the buildings, middle school and high school. And so students can check out loaners as they need to from that central location. And we did add an appropriate number to not only factor in for those loaners as they're out for repair, but also for new students coming in, just so we make sure that we have enough so new students that come in have a device.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Jamie, my hand's up.
Okay, I've just got to go to full screen there. I didn't have you on. All right, go ahead, Rob.
So I'm not sure who to pose this question to, but the Chromebooks that are going off the lease, are we keeping any of them for the younger grades, or how are we addressing the younger grades that currently don't have, or rather don't participate in the one-to-one program?
That's a really good question. So we do purchase devices for our elementary learners. And actually the devices that we've purchased for learning during COVID-19, those will be going back into our elementary buildings as well. So we have those on a little bit more of a flexible schedule than what the 612 lease looks like. We do send those 612 devices back to the lease company. As soon as the school year ends, we'll be collecting those up and sending them back. So.
All right, any other questions? Is this, do you think that this represents a big price hike compared to our lease 4 years ago, or compared to what it would have been without the COVID-19 and states like New York ordering so many?
I think our prices are actually better per unit. Isn't that correct, Jen? Probably $20 less this time around, somewhere in there.
Just about. I mean, we've seen, I think, got very lucky with our pricing that we received from all of our vendor partners that provided pricing. So the device that we're getting is a high quality device. Other districts have used it and really liked it. The warranty will be very meaningful for all of our students. If you've seen a high school or middle school student use a Chromebook for 4 years, that's a really long time. So we're really excited about how the pricing came in. It was very competitive.
So will us board members need to turn in our Chromebooks too?
No, you won't need to.
Okay.
That would require a whole new training session for you, Gene. We don't have the capacity to do that right now.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to, jeopardize, monopolize on that time that everyone has doing other stuff. Jen, you've helped in lots of areas in that regard, but I'm just fine with board members having to use old technologies. Give our students the best. So that's what
I do want to touch on this real quick because Jen's been on this meeting. Jen has been an absolute pivotal player in us rolling out our virtual learning across the district. And without her guidance and what she has done, this wouldn't have gone as well as it has gone. And so we are very, very thankful to have her. Her team has been outstanding. Heard a lot of positive feedback from our parents, from our staff. But I really want to make sure I take the time because this has been her Super Bowl, and she's winning by almost 10 touchdowns. I mean, it's really been a great thing. So very fortunate to have her.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
A Super Bowl that she didn't know was coming.
Yeah, right.
We've been practicing for 4 years, though. We're ready.
Oh, great.
Being a Packer.
Yeah. All right. Anything else more on that? Otherwise, I got to pull up on my phone again.
So then we'll move to the lease. Yeah.
Okay.
The lease. So this is a package. You can vote on each one separately. If you are comfortable enough, it would be nice for us to be able to move this whole package forward so we can secure our 3,300 units. So the lease proposals that came in, we're currently with Vantage, and as you can see there, Vantage came in better than the other proposals we got in. We actually have a negative lease situation, so the cost is $1,052,000 for 3,300 units, and the lease is $1,051,000, just under that. So it's a little less than the cost of the units. They also came in and offered to really put a modification on our current lease, and we would have the opportunity, if we don't get all the units back or all the units are not in working order, they're allowing an allowance of 350 units from that previous lease agreement, and they'll allow 330 units from the new lease. So that just means that's dollars saved for any units that we don't get back in, which really helps us out. They'll also pay all the return costs of return for all of the units. So that comes at about a price tag of somewhere roughly around $10,000. So we'd recommend Vantage Financial for the leasing portion of this.
Need a motion? You don't need a motion.
If the board is comfortable, a motion on each one of those to go with Trinity 3 and then to go with Vantage Financial.
Not for tonight though. This is going to be for the May action meeting. We did not list this as an action item tonight.
Okay. Sorry.
This was a discussion.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yep. Sorry about that.
These numbers. Yes. Well, the numbers and the pricing is not going to change between now and May 11, would it?
No, it shouldn't.
Okay. Well, that's what I was going to say. If there was some special reason we would need to suspend the rules or something, we would try to do that. If to save our taxpayers any kind of money, if there was potential for a negative impact. But if you're comfortable just leaving normal operating rules, then that's the way we'll do it. Is there other board members have questions on this? But great job. And again, yes, Carrie.
My point, Jamie, would only be that if for some reason the price would go up in a 2-week period, that we should vote on it tonight, I would be comfortable voting on it tonight. Sorry, Bob.
Or if I think the price of the units are secured, the only thing that could change would be the interest rate on the lease, and it would be tough to know what would happen there. That probably wouldn't change all that much.
Are we in
if
danger?
it does change at all?
Are we in danger of losing the ability to get them if we wait till May?
I don't think so. I think we'll be fine there. It's just we were trying to move that along, but I think we'll be fine.
If you guys are comfortable with it, I mean, you know, it isn't a posted agenda item, but and I mean, we did say these are discussion items. We didn't say discussion only. So, I mean, if you guys feel comfortable, you're welcome to do that. I know before we used to kind of combine them. It's a discussion and or action. And I think one of the things that we were asked to do is to break those apart on the agenda. But if you want to vote on it, in the end, it's been noted. It's just, if we can wait, we can do that too. So it's Jamie, it's your call.
Okay. Carrie, did you want to say something?
I would suggest voting just because
what I'll do is
we're all in consensus.
Yep, I'll entertain a motion to suspend to be able to have this advisory vote, and then we can, should the factors that we're fearful of not happen, we'll just have our official vote then when we can list it with the consent agenda at the next action meeting. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor of then suspending the rule and allow us to take an advisory vote tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none. All right. Then entertain a motion to approve the proposed lease arrangement as the administration has brought forward.
I moved.
So moved.
Okay. Sue moved, and I'll give Carrie the second. It was a nanosecond there difference in time. All in favor of approving the administration's recommendation to go with its Vantage, correct?
Yes.
All right. Say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and the motion passes. And just note that there were no dissents to either motion. All right.
Jamie?
Next up. Yes, Rob.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. This does not need to be on the consent agenda on a May 11th meeting, right? We've already taken action. It's complete, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, it can be, if we need to. I mean, I want to confer with legal counsel, and if Tim says that there was no reason to take the action, then I'd prefer to stick as much as we can with just putting on the consent, because there's no harm in putting this on the consent. But if something were to change or something like that, then yeah, this action tonight is intended to address it. So
we do.
Any other questions on that?
Well,
Public
Yes,
records
so-
requests.
I'm sorry. Andrew.
I just wanted to make a note that we do regularly get public records requests regarding bidding and processes and actions taken related to that bidding. So I would just want to be very careful.
Okay. So are you advocating that we would redo this again at the next on a consent agenda basis?
Consent agenda, yeah, but I think that would be the best practice just because of those. I mean, I have one pending right now.
Right.
But Tim could go ahead and start getting the order done, given the competitiveness right now, maybe with other educational institutions. And of course, I don't know how long they gave you this. How long does this bid last for you? Is there a cutoff date that you have to decide while this bid was?
So the units are normally, they're a 30-day guarantee. Jen, do you have any additional information on that?
When we spoke with the vendor Trinity 3, they were understanding of board process and they were willing to work around our board process. So they're excited to be a part of the Hudson team and looking forward to that process going through whenever it goes through. So.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your cooperation in that regard. Now, next up is the 2019-2020 financial review. Sitting here in April, we've got May, June, and July, 3 full months left.
Yes. So we went back in and started to look through to kind of try and project out where we think we're going to be. And of course, expenditures are down because, you know, they're up in some areas, but mostly down in areas because of the way we're operating right now. I'll just run through a few of the line items on that report. And
Tim, would it be possible? I don't know if you can do it or Nick can do it. Can we do a screen share so
Sure.
that document's in front of us?
Sure, just one second.
I'm just tired of flipping back and forth. It's hard for me to see people with their hands raised if I'm flipping back and forth with a document. So
Okay, so I could, if the host has to enable it though. You're muted.
Nick's on mute.
I feel like we're in one of those Zoom videos that you watch online. Tim, I will go ahead and share that right now. Just give me one.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second.
I think we got a couple agenda items coming up that would be good to have that screen share ability so that that's in front of everyone.
Are you guys able to see it now?
Yep, there we go. Okay, so some of the bigger drivers, if we look at revenues, we're down there, and of course, reason being student fees and facility rental fees are down. It just makes sense. The open enrollment we're expecting that will be up roughly $80,000 to the positive. So just as Dave mentioned, I think some of the different things that are happening are starting to turn that number early. If you go down to the very bottom line under the revenues, we're looking at E-rate reimbursements are about $60,000 ahead of where we had expected those to be. And those are just reimbursements for purchasing technology. It's a federal grant through the government, so through the federal government. Under wages and salaries, we're expecting about a $600,000 savings in wage structures. That's the different wage and performance increases, and then $200,000 in sub costs. Under benefits, we've got about $1 million in health insurance claims that is trending about $1 million under where we think it is going to wind up. And we also have the FICA and Wisconsin Retirement System payments that will be about $140,000 less. Under purchase services, we've got about $520,000 in projects that will be postponed into next year. And there's a list of those projects at the bottom of this report. And then we've got supplies and some non-capital purchases in there as well that are coming under. And then we've got some additional capital projects, and then vehicle purchases that won't be happening this year. So if we scroll down to the bottom of that.
Oops, sorry.
Thank you. Oops. Scroll up just a little bit. There you go. Perfect. So we've got where we originally budgeted $69,936,000 in expenditures with a $671,000 surplus. That will now be, we're projecting to only have $66,500,000 as total expenditures. So we'd be about 3.5 million better than what we were anticipating. And then if we scroll down a little bit further, you can see the capital projects that are postponed into next year. We've got some district-wide fencing. We've got a few few different projects at Willow River that would be postponed. We are, however, Bruce talked a little bit about doing some of the pool maintenance projects early, and that is exactly what we're doing. We do have a roof replacement that we're trying to get scheduled early as well. That will work out good because that one we wouldn't be able, for safety reasons, we wouldn't be able to have people in that area. So, but our delayed projects, which we postpone until the 2021 budget, would be about that $520,000. So any questions?
So out of that 3.4 million or 3.5 million in savings, about $500,000 will have to be spent just in the next school year budget.
Right. We'll roll those projects forward with some additional dollars in the budget.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes, Rob.
Just out of curiosity, if the money is there and we anticipate a surplus, why are we holding off on completing the list of projects, out of curiosity?
Oh, that's a good question, Rob. So one of the big reasons is because with the shutdown, some of the things that we're doing, for example, at Willow, are going to require drawings, are going to require at least city approvals, various authority approvals to get those done. And there just simply isn't time to start those and get them completed by the end of the fiscal year. So that's the big reason why.
So the projects aren't delayed. It's just by the time now we start on the process, it'll just be taken out of FY21 instead of FY20's budget.
Correct.
Any other questions? I can't see everyone, but any other questions on this agenda item? Otherwise, we'll move into then the salary recommendation for 2021. And this is on our agenda. It typically might have been in there in March. I mean, we tried to put it in there around this time of year every year, but we definitely have to have it on there because it's like one of the first decisions to be made going into making the budget for 2021. So Nick or Tim,
Yep. So a couple things kind of to build on what Tim talked about. So part of the reason why we gave you kind of an updated 1920 financial review, you could kind of see how we're sitting as we head into the next fiscal year. And then we head into recommendations as it relates to staffing. And usually what we do is we make a recommendation, usually at the March work session for the April board meeting, for you guys to approve a board approved increase, which is kind of the general increase that goes across all employees with the exception of the parameters that Andrea's laid out in her memo. And so we did we postponed that a month and brought it this month to look at it. Couple things to kind of keep in mind. You can look at the budget impact document that Tim has created, and this is where it kind of goes hand in hand. Want to look at, what are we thinking things are going to look like next year? And it's going to be, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Is that me or somebody got to mute their microphone maybe? Maybe Tim or Jamie, you guys are the two that aren't muted. What we're looking at is, okay, what do things look like? And we've had lots of different conversations with different folks around the state, trying to understand what the COVID situation, what does that mean to state revenues? What does that potentially mean for us? And it could be a variety, it's kind of a variety of responses. I did have a conversation with Congressman Zimmerman about what his thoughts were as it related to the budget. And he does sit on the Joint Finance Committee, and he's kind of worked his way through into leadership positions for the majority party right now. So trying to get an understanding of what his thoughts were. I talked to him last week. And, I think right now they're not projecting that they're going to have to do a drastic major across the board cut as we thought might be happening or coming down the pipe. One of the things that, kind of fate played out well, I think, for everybody is, we had this almost $1 billion surplus. We were heading into the end of this fiscal year, and we had one party that wanted to give it back in tax relief. Another party wanted to spend it on other things, and it's almost serendipitous that we end up neither party got it done, and so now this money is sat there to try to cushion, I think, the blow of what's going to happen with the state budget. And so what his comments were is there probably going to be a need potentially for a budget repair bill that's going to come sometime in the next 3 months or so, but he was not foreseeing it. Nobody was talking about massive cuts across the board or anything like that. He thought maybe best case scenario, we'd get what we were planning on getting in the second year of the biennium. Worst case scenario, we'd be looking at potentially being frozen at what we got this year and not get the increases for the second year of the biennium, because there were some pretty substantial dollars for education in the second year of the biennium. And so, and then, you have the backfill of some of the other stuff. Now, the other big concern as you look at this stuff is potentially what happens in not necessarily the second year of this biennium budget, but what happens in the new biennium budget that they'll be trying to put together next spring. And, and what does that look like? And so, we try to take all these things into consideration. We also try to look at, trying to maintain some level of balance with our property taxpayers. And so what Tim has put together here is on the far left side, you have the base year 1920. What I asked him to do is put together how much did we collect in property tax for the current fiscal year. And we collected about 48,185,000. And so if, essentially we had to make some assumptions. I think this last year we were up about 10% in property value. I think Tim assumed that we'd maybe go up 6, be a little bit more, conservative, but we've been going up by some pretty substantial numbers over the past years. So when you start to look at that and you say, okay, just, if you kind of hold things constant, how much more property tax are we going to collect? If we have a 0% increase in salaries, let's say we just freeze it, it's a 0% increase in salaries, and we just let the levy do what it's done in the past, we collect about $830,000 more in property tax than we did in this fiscal year, based on those assumptions. If we went with a 1% increase for staff, board-approved increase for staff, and we assume the performance pay structure stay in place and all those things, it would take an increase of about 1.2 million in additional property tax collection. However, if you look at the mill rate, which is the second line, you'll see the mill rate dropping. This year our mill rate was 1036. Tim shows that if we go a freeze, it could drop as low as 994. If we go 1% salary increase for staff, it would still drop about 33 cents. One of the things that you would have the option to do, and we talked about the surplus that we had at the end of this year, is you would have the option potentially that if you wanted to freeze the property tax collection, so not collect any more in property tax than you collected this year, it would actually drop the mill rate close to 60 cents. And you could backfill that amount even if you went with the 1% across the board increase, with about $1.2 million with the fund balance, $1.3 million fund balance, which you would have because we're going to run a surplus this year. However, my only caution on that would be is if you allow the mill rate to drop 60 or 70 cents and you're backfilling it with fund balance, and then all of a sudden we have some challenges in the following years, you could have it rubber band back, and all of a sudden you could see another 70-cent increase, and all of a sudden people are going to go, wow, I mean, we bought a $100 million high school and you only made our mill rate go up about 80 some cents. It just creates some challenges. So one of the things we want to look at, and again, this isn't a budget meeting tonight, but we want to make sure that you understand that even if you go with the 1% raise right now, it will not tie your hands for the fall should you decide to try to implement some level of property tax relief as it relates to district collections and things along those lines. We should be all right to be able to implement some of those things. In addition to the recommendation, and Andrea laid it out in the memo, is it would be a 1% board approved increase across the board. And then, you know, what we're finally in is now that we've kind of settled into our performance pay structure. When the pay structure lays over top of it, we're not having these really huge additional overall percentages. If you remember those first couple of years when we were having to retro pay, and I guess it wasn't, I don't remember what we called it. We called it something that was creative that we haven't talked about in a year. Andrea, do you remember what it's called?
Cycle adjustments.
Cycle adjustment. There we go. If you remember, you know, you were given like a 2% board approved increase, but the overall increase was almost 5.5%. And so we finally settled into this where at a 1% across the board increase, even when you add all of the performance components for both for support staff, for administrative staff, and for our certified teaching staff, it comes out to be overall right around 2% based on our projections that Mark and Tim have put together. So we're settling into a little bit more normal where it's, you know, it's not these, you know, high end where it's coming. We did try to do some comparable checking, and I think Andrea talked about this in the memo. It's really hard to do comparables. We have some districts that are still a couple years behind. I mean, there are literally Minnesota districts that haven't settled even last year's salaries yet, so it makes it hard to get those. We do have a variety of districts on the Wisconsin side. I did talk to the superintendents at River Falls and New Richmond. River Falls is going with like a 3.88% increase. And New Richmond is waiting they're going to wait till October to make a decision. So that also is talked about in Andrea's memo, where you would have the option, if you choose to do so, you could say, hey, let's issue contracts this year with the existing salaries on them. Come back in October when we have maybe a little better picture of what the state's going to do for this next fiscal year. Make the decision on the board approved increase, and then retro pay it back to July 1. So everybody's held harmless, but it gives you guys a little bit more time to make that decision, get a little bit more clear picture. But what we would want the board to do is, if you choose to do that, which you can, is to be committed to, regardless, you know, of kind of what that looks like, is that you're committed to retroing at least the performance pay structure, so people know that the things that we've already committed to as a district, we're going to continue to commit to. I mean, you may end up with like a 0% board increase in October, but the performance pay structures would still be in place. And I think that's important.
Yes.
There's another piece on there, one last piece, and I know it's Bob has brought it up multiple times, is we do have this group of teachers that have fallen out of alignment with their colleagues and similar experience. And so Andrea addresses that in the memo, but the way we would recommend that is we would recommend a 1% enhanced percentage for those people that would qualify. We'd be asking, you know, the board for that discretion. 1% a year, we'd commit to 1% a year for 4 years. So it'd be equivalent to 4% over 4 years to try to help bring them up. But some people might say, well, that's not very much, but it's a balancing act between trying to bring them up. But if you bring them up too quick, then all of a sudden they move into the next tier of people, and then you have the same issues happening. And so it's trying to find a blended approach with that. And so that would be the other component of this recommendation, is that if you choose, one, you could choose to approve this next meeting as it is, or you can pull it apart, or two, you can choose to I don't want to say kick can on the road, but delay the decision, but with the caveat that you have every intention of honoring the performance pay structure and potentially the structure related to trying to help these people that are kind of in that limbo state. I think would go a long way with staff to be able to say, okay, yes, you know, we're committed, but we want to have a clear picture. With that, Andrea, did I miss anything on those pieces?
I think the other piece to know about if we wait until October is that we've already talked with teachers that educator effectiveness for this year isn't going to be completed till then anyway. So their summatives for teachers are not going to be completed again till the fall. So it would all line up perfectly fine to wait and just issue status quo contracts and letters of intent for now, knowing that we'll come back and revisit it in October.
All right, I want to hear from board members on how they feel on that. Rob?
I'm supportive of our teachers and our performance pay. I think given where the economy is, I think it would show sensitivity on our part to wait till October, understanding that that it would be retroactive. Kudos to Nick and the team for reviewing the teachers that were in the gray area, and looking forward to accomplishing addressing those changes as well. But I think waiting till October and making it retroactive, whatever we decide is likely appropriate at this time.
And before I see Bob, you got your hand up, and I'll let you talk next, but I just want to clarify this potential for making it retroactive and delaying the decision on all three pieces, as opposed to just delaying on the flat adjustment and allowing the performance pay and our misaligned correction group to go forward with those. So that's what I'm asking is it harder to go forward with 2 out of 3, or is it better to go forward with just delaying all 3?
Much harder to go forward with 2 out of 3.
We need to, like for our support staff compensation system, the raises are contingent upon what the board approved increases, because it's just a +1 +2 on top of that. So we would not be able to implement part of an increase when it comes to like support staff. So I would say freezing it all is like a status quo for as of 1920 leading into 2020. 2021 would be definitely highly desired from both finance and HR perspective.
Yeah. Point of clarification, my comments were to delay all 3 till October.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Bruce has both hands up, Jamie.
All right, Bruce has got both hands up, but Bob was next.
No, Bob, go to Bob. Go to Bob.
I only had one hand up, Bruce. I don't want to.
Bob's head is up.
No, I just real quick. And part of me says no, we got to do this now. And we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. But as long as the communication to those teachers and the retroactive plan, as long as that's explained to them completely, so they understand that we are acting and we are getting this taken care of, I'm okay with waiting to October, especially if it means all 3 of them working out better. But communication is key on this one with me. So.
Yeah, I hear you, Bob. I guess, and Bruce, did you want to weigh in or not?
Everybody said everything already. I don't need to say anything anymore.
Well,
but I do think that we need to get more information at that time. I honestly, there's still so many unknowns right now. So I think that's great communication. I think it shows good support for our teachers as well. So I'm down.
And to clarify too, with respect to that 1%, I put in the memo that it'd be good to be able to have like some analysis done on an individual basis, because there's some employees that are really close. And so whether that percent is needed over the full 4 years to be internally comparable, or whether some people need a bit more of consideration. I think we want to have some flexibility with that to align them, not perfectly. We're not going to fix the problem necessarily, but we're going to at least partially address the problem.
Well, if we were to talk about all 3, and we were now fast forwarding 6 months into October, I would say our highest moral obligation is to the performance pay, because that's kind of to me, that's a contract that we've had and a commitment to stay with that. So if we were to, unless there was some kind of like nationwide 20% deflation rate or something like that happened, I'd be inclined to say that gets first dibs, and almost equal to it would be adjusting this misaligned group that we've been telling for 3 years that something was going to be done. The one that I'm, one most open-minded about, either pro or either for or against, is the whether it's going to be 1%, 0%, or anything else. And I mean, I wouldn't be advocating for a negative number necessarily, but yeah, I think that getting more information is a good idea. But other thoughts, Carrie, do you have anything or to add? Are you like with Bruce? Everyone said everything. All right. But I think we've got consensus then for board members to get this on. Would it be thought that we would put it on for the September work session and then the October action meeting, or would we put it on for the October work session, which is typically when we set the mill rate?
I think what we'll do is we'll have a better idea when we get a better picture from the legislature and what they're going to do. I think one of the things that what we'll want you guys to do probably is take action in May, official action at the May 11th board meeting saying that you want to table this. You'll want to table this until sometime in the fall in order to have a clear financial picture of what things are going to be. That way we can work through that messaging and some of those pieces as we work through it. I do think though, however, it is important for you to, as you do table it, it will be important for the board to be able to, if they feel strongly about the two pieces, the making the one group whole and also the performance pay, is that if you table it, there would be something in the motion would say with every intent to make good on those recommendations, so that people know that there's a level of trust there, and that really the only thing you're kind of waiting on or looking at making a decision on is really the board approved increase. But the other components, look all right, is kind of what we'd be looking for.
Right, and that's why I was asking as far as timing. I know it's usually better to not to under promise and over deliver, but I also don't like being too vague. So that's why I was just saying, we only want to say it's September or October. If we're by law, we have to set the mill rate in late October. So that would be the latest that we would be considering this, I assume.
Yeah, we'll have a pretty good idea what the legislature's thinking in the next probably 10 weeks. 10 to 12 weeks, the next 3 months. If they're going to do a budget repair bill, they're going to have to obviously do it before we get ready to set state aid calculations and things like that. So I would think that we would have that information, but again, want to, under promise and over produce. And so, we'll have a pretty clear picture. I think the Revenue Estimating Committee or the Legislative Fiscal Bureau is coming out with their findings. I think in the next, they thought 3 or 4 weeks. And then, also the federal government has said that a phase 4 of stabilization would be targeting state and local governments as well, and what that potentially looks like as well. And so, I think the big piece is, we wanted to take as conservative approach as we could with this, and continue to move forward on these things. So that's what we'll do. So on the 11th, this will be on the agenda. You guys kind of understand how the motion would read, or you guys can decide that time how you want to make your motion. But essentially, you'd be tabling it at that meeting. That way you'd have some official action. If you don't even want to bring it up at that meeting, you can tell us now and we'll say we're not even going to bring it up. It's just, I think people are kind of wondering what is the official action on this, because this is typically the time of year, especially if we're going to issue status quo contracts. I think it would be good to have some level of official action by the board as to why we're issuing those versus just looking like our HR department didn't update salaries.
Wouldn't be appreciated, no.
Yeah, I think we'll put it on as a separate action item, allow for a comment by board members, and then a specific motion unless somebody's got other thoughts. I'm not seeing any hands waved. All right. So next up, if you could share, Nick, with everybody the meeting schedule for 2021 proposed.
Yep. Just let me pull it up here. Okay. I'm not quite as proficient. Can you guys see it?
One magnification would be great.
How about I do even a little bit more better than that? So.
Okay.
Are you able to see that, or do you need me to zoom? I don't even know. I can probably zoom in better than that. But. So.
Scroll down on just a hair. There you go.
Yep. So a couple things on this. the Monday Night Football schedule is not out yet. I believe Jamie told me that comes out May 4th. So I
If
guess
there's any major conflicts, we'll let you know, Nick.
I mean, I guess if you want to watch Aaron Rodgers play for the Bears, as being rumored, that's fine. But just a couple things that don't really conflict with it. So our state conventions, the 20th to the 22nd in Milwaukee, that's typically a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So that usually doesn't impact our board meetings. The NSBA annual conference is in New Orleans. That may impact that meeting on the April 12th, meeting. So if board members want to go, I mean, who knows? People may not want to go anywhere near New Orleans at that time next year. I don't know. But otherwise, Tim and I tried to look for conflicts, and I think, as of right now, those are kind of the only conflicts that we're considering. The June one, I will say, however, part of the reason why I prefer the 29th is I am gone on the week of the 22nd. You can absolutely meet without me, or I can try to zoom into that meeting. Otherwise, we're supposed to be fishing up north, so I don't know what kind of reception I would get for that Zoom. But if we do the 29th and that wouldn't upset any apple carts with folks, I would appreciate it.
Okay, well, I think it's about every 3 months that we have, normally we have 2 weeks in between meetings, but every 3 months there's 3 weeks in between an action meeting or a work session and an action meeting. So I think pushing that action meeting back to the 29th of June still gives 2 weeks of preparation for the 13th.
Yeah, so that'd be a work session. So you'd still have 2 weeks in between the work session and the action meeting for July.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions, comments, concerns about it?
Well, the other thing that we had the biggest conflict with, I think it didn't rival Monday Night Football at all, was music concerts that we seem to have the biggest conflict with. So is there anything we can do about that?
Well, I mean, I guess the other question would be, one, we can make sure the board can say, don't schedule music concerts on Monday nights of board meetings, and we can let them, staff know that here's the schedule, do not schedule on these dates, or you could move to a different night of the week altogether. I don't think you want to move back and forth different nights of the week all year long, but I mean, you could say, we'll go to Tuesday nights instead of Mondays. Now, we went to Mondays from Tuesdays because we had a lot of athletic board member conflicts. And that's why, because we tend to have, there were games on Tuesday nights and Friday nights. And so then we moved to Mondays, and now we're kind of, the board that have kids involved and stuff. Now it's more fine arts conflicts. And so that's just kind of the challenges that we have. So if you want, we can absolutely, let principals and activities know that these concerts need to avoid these Mondays. You let me know.
Jamie, Nick, I would weigh in to say that probably kids that are in the concerts might also be on a team. So if it's only a few times a year, that it might be prudent for us to change our meetings rather than double book a kid with a concert and a game. And it'd be a lot of stress on the parking lot as well.
Can I make a suggestion for the action meeting in December? Because I don't know I think the concert would likely be that 14th because it's typically the second Sunday and the second Monday. What if we met on December 8th, which would be a Tuesday? I know that the only board meeting that we move to Tuesday always is that work session in May because of Memorial Day. So would anyone, like Nick said, I don't want to be flip-flopping back and forth between Mondays and Tuesdays and have a 50% split or anything. But would that help if we moved the action meeting to Tuesday, December 8th? And of course, I defer to the parents who have choir members and us, the rest of us empty nesters who like to go to that Christmas concert and want to. I just think December 8th is a good timing for that action meeting in December, given that the work session is before Thanksgiving on Monday, the 23rd, and it gives us more than a 1 week break in between the action and the work session.
Jamie, did I miss it? Are we avoiding December 7th for a reason? I mean, would we not just move it up a week?
Because then if they make the Christmas concert December 7th, then we'll be back to conflict. So we know that the Christmas concerts are on Mondays following a Sunday. It's just that it has flipped back and forth between
Sure.
the first and the second.
The Home for the Holidays concert's already scheduled for December 14th.
Okay, so now we have.
Mr. President?
Yes.
And I can't speak for Bruce, but I have a senior inquire this next year. So if there's, if it's convenient for everybody to move some of those dates, that'd be great. And if not, so be it.
I too have a senior.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the question I'm asking you guys. I mean, we can request that we don't have choir concerts on these nights, or we can move these meetings. So, you know, it's kind of up to you guys. I mean,
I think we move them. I think we move the meetings.
Agree.
Agree with Bruce.
Agree.
Okay, other than December 7th, any other, I mean, that's the purpose of us setting the schedule, and we will codify this, if you will, with a motion on May 11, is so that the public knows when we're meeting. And I want to avoid as much as possible, or I think it's preferable for us to avoid changing meeting dates once we have it.
Well, and do you guys, I mean, one of the things, because even when you move a meeting from a Monday to a Tuesday, you're going to create your own set of changes. I mean, the other option is on the weekends when you do have or on the Mondays when you do have a choir concert, you could move the meeting to Sunday night if you wanted to. There's no rules against us meeting on a Sunday night versus a Monday night, and we would have probably virtually no conflicts that evening, unless people are like, there's no way, I don't want to do this on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, is it just Home for the Holidays that's scheduled, or are the rest of those events already scheduled for the 20th?
There's usually two other concerts that are generally for Monday nights.
There's typically a February one, isn't there?
No, I think what Heather's question is, are they already scheduled? So do we already know when they are? Tracy would probably have a better handle on that than I would. Tracy? Maybe.
Yes. All the music schedule has been put together. And there is a concert October 12th for choir that I'm aware of. I haven't looked at the full schedule yet.
So, I mean, again, I just, you know, that's where I'd ask the question, what do you want to move it to a Tuesday or move it up to a Sunday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday the 13th, I guess that week will be first week of football playoffs. So they typically play on a Friday. I guess there's potential for volleyball regionals or something like that, but Tuesday the 13th, we've got Monday the 7th are our two changes. Any others that people want to see?
Tracy, do you know the February concert date?
I am looking. I don't have it right yet.
I mean, long and the short, if Tracy has the list of conflicts at her, not at the moment, of course, but if we could change those Mondays to Tuesdays, assuming the rest of the board agrees, then we can move on with the agenda.
Well, yeah, and
just a heads up. I mean, we got to go back into your board policies then, because I'm pretty sure you guys have listed in your board policy which date you have your regular meeting every month. It's like the first or second Monday. So we have to go in. You guys are going to have to, when you go to approve this, you're going to have to either agree to amend your policy, suspend your policy, or whatever it is you want to do to move the meetings. If you're going to set the schedule, that's different. I mean, when we have emergencies that come up, your policy, I think, gives some leeway to move meetings. It's just if you're going to set the schedule, then I think we need to change the policy. Andrea probably has it.
Okay, well then,
I'm searching
is
it right
that
now.
some? Okay,
Yeah, if we could just do both of those at the May 11th, that'd be a way to remedy this.
Yeah, we'll
Have you-
just, you have to redo, I mean, we'll have to suspend and redo your board policy because you'd be conflicting with board policy.
Right.
February 8th is a big band concert, which is we're doing along with River Falls.
The language of the policy actually gives you some flexibility. It says the school board will hold a regular meeting at least once a month at a time and place determined by the board. Regular school board meetings will be held on the second Monday of every month beginning at 6:30 p.m. unless a different date or time is determined by the board president and the superintendent, or if the president is not available, by the vice president and the superintendent.
And we got to change the times on that anyway. So, all right. So, so the 8th, that's the big band concert. Do you want to move as well? Does anybody have children in band? Okay.
I don't personally have a conflict.
Okay. Okay, so we'll kind of hold this as it is. It looks like we have some liberty on that. The next thing with this is, do you like the times? Do you want to change the times? Are you okay with the times? The 5:30.
This is Rob. The times have been working great.
Times are good.
Times are good for Sue.
there's been several nights like tonight where that 5:30 start is appreciated instead of a 6 or 6:30 start. So, any other comments on the times? Otherwise, we'll keep the times the same and we'll move forward with this schedule. And if somebody finds some glaring omission that we failed to note, then we can raise that. But otherwise, we would hope to be able to approve this meeting schedule and stick to it.
Yep.
All right, next. Oh, somebody. All right, just changing the screen share there. Next up is student policy section update number 3. Is this Andrea?
This is Aaron,
yeah.
or Andrea. Yeah.
Aaron and I are gonna go through this. I'm just gonna go through some of the logistics first, and Aaron can talk about some of the, the rationale for the changes. As we talked about when we first were looking at these policies, the 400 series, this was an area we knew we had to gut and redo because there was conflicting policies as we're going through. So you'll see that first part of it is significant deletions. There was no reason to closely analyze it when we knew it had to be a gut job. So what we did was delete several of the harassment policies and then replace them with new language. So starting with 411.1 of further harassment and then kind of working our way through, we did have some renumbering of policies based on the combination of WASB's guidance. And also as we're looking at it with the goal of being transparent and open about how we process these types of complaints, we wanted to align it with the employee section as well, where we had the I call it the big 3, discrimination, harassment, and kind of like the bullying type of policy for employees, all staff. We also wanted something similar for our students so that we're able to have a similar flow, and also so that it's all housed in one place where it's similarly situated types of behaviors. And so the combination of renumbering some of the policies and then also putting them in a more close proximity in terms of the order, we think that overall it's significant advancement in terms of where we've been historically with harassment and bullying.
Yeah, for sure. So the first one is the updated harassment policy, along with the procedures that have been deleted, because we would be following those same procedures we had outlined in policy 411. Just to make it cleaner that these are our set of procedures, where in the past they were a little bit different. The next one is that homeless education policy. Just to remind you, this is a policy that we had talked about back in August. This is just simply renumbering this policy. So the content has already been approved. Children in foster care is a new policy. It's very similar to homeless policy, that it outlines our current practice, so that we're ensuring that continuity of education for children in out-of-home placements. This is something that DPI has been advocating that schools add to their student policies. Along with that, education of children of military families kind of outlines enrollment considerations and participation considerations that districts would, that we would make for those families. And then lastly is that anti-bullying policy, and we've sort of significantly beefed up this policy. Specifically, something that was added is it outlines our ability to investigate instances of bullying outside of the educational environment if it has affected the learning environment. And I think, you know, when we're talking about the times that we live in, this can happen in terms of cyberbullying and those sorts of things. So also beefed up the procedures for investigating to include timeline to complete the investigation, documenting the results, and then the appeal process as well.
And to do a couple quick clarifying points, I did do a global search on these policies and found a couple he, she's where I hadn't added the they, them. And so I've gone through this. I think I found 4 or 5 of them that now the most recent update as of like 5:15 tonight has that updated as well. And then another question we got, I don't want to step on Sue's toes. Right?
Oh, no, you're fine.
Talk
I
about.
was just gonna probably be
Yep.
asking. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sue.
I've already communicated with you several times, but I want to compliment on Heather, who's over here on my screen. I was glad she brought up the pronoun thing. That's very nice that you're very timely that you're following up on that. No, my question, and I think this is what Aaron was telling me, is policy 411 that we approved, the language for non-discrimination.
Right.
With all the protective groups and so on.
Yep.
And I'm understanding that now everything will be updated using that language, right?
Yep. Right.
So like even the code of conduct that we
Yep.
looked at, Aaron, tonight, it hasn't been changed, but it's
Correct. I made a note of that and followed up with Aaron. So that will be updated as well. The difference between, so the policy 411, that big student non-discrimination, and then, so that is kind of our district's definition, right? That applies to all sorts of different policies, including the harassment one. What the language that wasn't included in the harassment one, and we certainly can add it in there if it provides more clarity, is the parenthetical phrases that provided more information. So we can certainly add that.
I think it's absolutely necessary because clarity is everything. And so is transparency and policy. Well, I just think you're doing a great job with it.
Well, I'm a huge believer of transparency and, you know, clarity, and that's why I think we're reorganizing it. I like the idea of mirroring the language because, again, I consider these like the big 3, right? In terms of protecting students, I think the harassment, discrimination, and bullying so important. And so to have additional clarity by basically cutting and pasting the language to mirror each other in 411 and 411.1, I think makes total sense. I think we just were hesitant at first because there's so many areas within the district where it references that bigger paragraph. And I think we don't want to worry about having conflicting language either. We want 411 definition to be the overarching, like that's what's driving the definition, or, you know, driving all of it. But this is one where we can certainly mirror that language in the harassment section too. I just think it's sometimes we don't always want to spell it all out because we have to worry about updating every single one. Then our people are going to say, why didn't you update that one as compared to that one? So I'm just trying to be a little careful in that regard. But this one's significant enough that I don't see it as problematic.
Well, and of course, I link it back to Aaron's not, doesn't have, we don't have the whole report yet because of the interference of COVID, but the information that we're learning from the youth risk behavior survey certainly gives us firepower, if you will, and justifies the work we are doing with diversity and inclusion and making sure we're updated in our discrimination policies and so on. So our district doesn't have to apologize for the work we're doing, but it is still a little bit of new tender territory. And I thank you, Andrea, for the amazingly wonderful explanation you gave me in an email. Your reply was, it was just a Sukatas's dream to have things laid out the way you did. So I thank you for that.
Thanks. Well, and at the bullying policy too, I think though, is just by beefing it up in the way we have now, by adding this process, by adding more clarity on what steps kids take to go to the YRBS and some of the data that we've gotten back, I think that's empowering. And I think that it gives students who are in a challenging, and staff with the other policies, but students here, a path forward, right? It lays out, if I feel I'm being discriminated against, if I feel I'm being harassed, or if I'm but if I'm being bullied, this is the path I can go down. And I think it's really great that we're going in this direction with these different policies.
Well, you have my support.
All right. Is there any other questions on this? Otherwise, this will be on the agenda for first reading at the next action meeting. And then remember, it takes 2 readings. So we want to get this part of our new policy. So any other questions? Hearing none, then last open agenda item is the board presentations in virtual setting feedback. And I think is this Aaron's or Nick's?
This one's mine. So just wanting, we've kind of suspended the additional reports that involve curriculum or student service reports and things along those lines. We've suspended them indefinitely, not knowing if you guys wanted to do them virtually. We can absolutely bring them back. Just want to get your thoughts on it, because we can have people come in and do their reports virtually, do a screen share reports. What is your feeling on it? We may be out of this type of meeting in a month. We may be in this type of meeting for 2 months. Go ahead,
Bruce.
I like the reports. I think we can get those reports in this setting just fine. Okay. Personally.
I'd like the reports. If we can get them in writing, kind of quote the long version, and if the oral report can be more of the executive summary. Unless people disagree and think of the other way around, they want the written report to be just an executive summary and prefer the verbal report be 20 or 25 minutes long.
I agree with Jamie. If there's time to do it.
Yeah, I like Jamie's idea too, because we would be seeing the PowerPoint ahead of time. And then I'm really kind of anxious to see the other.
Sue, you muted yourself.
Why would I ever mute myself? Deb does it all the time. No, I'm looking forward to the last 2/3 portions of the YARBIS report.
I also think
if everyone recalls, we've got June and July coming up.
I was just going to say, I think
Bruce.
they can get bonus points for the most creative virtual background as well during their presentations.
Yeah. Well, I think that we've got the June and July meeting where we have a couple hours of reports at each of those. And again, working for, it's getting late. You guys are getting pumpy. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session. But whoever does this motion has to, there's all 4 subsections.
Okay, just so you know, I sent you a calendar invite to the closed session, which is a separate Zoom meeting. So we'll end up getting out of this Zoom, going into a different meeting. So just so everybody's aware.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move to go to closed session. Board will entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, for the purpose of considering the retirement benefits of a certified staff member. B, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, for the purpose of considering potential layoffs of support staff individuals. C, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E, regarding negotiations related to a limited mutual release agreement. And D, pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E, regarding negotiations related to a vendor agreement.
Second. Second.
Okay, that second, you have to restate the whole motion. No, just kidding. All right, we got a motion, we got a second. And it's time for a roll call vote. I'm going to go from my bottom of the Hollywood squares up. Hanson.
Aye.
Need an aye or a nay? All right. Brown.
Aye.
Aye.
Katas.
Aye.
Loglin.
Aye.
Bauman.
Aye.
Carrie.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
And just Jamie says aye. All right, where the motion passes, we're now going to go into closed session. So you need to leave this meeting and for the close. Thank you.